When given the opportunity to choose what creature to become in the vast expanse of the galaxy, what would you choose to transform to? Would you rather be a monster with a metallic outer shell to tear apart human spacecraft? Or perhaps a mutated creature with long, sharp claws to slaughter opponents on the battlefield? Or maybe a venomous bee that specializes in wreaking havoc on people's heads? He had once played the roles of all the grotesque creatures, tried to act within their confines countless times, only to eventually realize that he was truly connected to a single, shapeless species referred to as the Formless, advertised as having a cool, fiery appearance like the alien monsters in movies, plus the ability to read genes from victims to evolve. It may sound powerful as the top god, but the Formless was rarely chosen because it had no special skills upon entering the game, and he couldn't communicate with other creatures, making him an easy target for others to shoot him down, hence being ranked as the weakest creature in the game. But there was one feature that made him more attractive than other creatures, which was the ability to evolve based on the player's choices, with the thought that he would evolve into a powerful and terrifying creature like Venom with six packs in the Marvel movie. The protagonist chose to transform into a new form. It had no higher purpose than merely to survive, and it was endowed with super sensory ability. He raised his pale face to read the new player information once again. He opened his ugly-looking case to check and let out a sigh. At first, he thought it would be great, but in the end, he transformed into a space creature that looked like a mutated beetle, starving year-round like this. He scrolled through TikTok for a long time, and in the end, he had this appearance. He reluctantly scratched his bald head beyond the imagined appearance. He had to ignore the complaints and frustrations and threw himself onto the ground, scratching himself like a dog with fleas. Unexpectedly, the Formless turned out to be a type of insect that molted. The itching from the molting tormented him the whole day. He had no other option but to endure it. After molting, he crawled out to the corridor, searching for something to eat for his empty stomach. Surrounded by nothing but himself, Formless crawled cautiously while constantly raising his neck. He discovered that he had been placed on a luxurious-looking spaceship, like the equipment of the Galactic Union Corporation. He immediately activated his super sensory skill, silently observing every nook and cranny of the entire ship, from top to bottom. He silently sensed whether anyone had walked in here and stepped on his head. As he found the place with food, Formless quickly turned in another direction, using his 6 articulated legs to jump onto a large box with a password. He had no idea how to crack the safe, so he tried typing 1,2,3,4, and surprisingly, it opened. Several energy bars emitted smoke, inviting him. Formless quickly peeled off a layer of the shell as if he was still a human, using his sparse teeth to chew vigorously. He didn't know if his taste buds were different, but he found the food unappetizing, with a taste no different from chewing cardboard. While trying to swallow them down, a small noise from behind startled him, causing him to turn around quickly, using his sharp tail to stab before he could even see what it was. At this moment, Formless realized it was a small cockroach that was struggling. He eagerly put it into his mouth and silently thought it was surprisingly juicy. Has anyone tried it yet? Give me a review. Swallowing the cockroach with a gulp, the system popped up a message indicating the successful absorption of winged cockroach genes. If he wants, he could try using them to transform. Starting to feel excited now. Initially, he chose this weak creature because of its gene-absorbing ability. The more he killed, the more genes he could absorb, allowing Formless to evolve into higher forms that he had never expected. This time, he was given wings. He was excited to see if a cockroach spreading its wings in the bathroom would make the girl scream, and then a white flying scorpion would make them shiver. The back of Formless started to twitch. Within seconds, 2 wings had grown to fit his body size, with a pair of thin wings underneath. Expanding his wings to look at them for a moment, Formless was embarrassed because he didn't know how to activate them. It occurred to Formless that the wings were on his back, not on his rear end, so he probably didn't need to flex his rear muscles or squeeze his buttocks. Using his back muscles seemed to work just fine. After contemplating this, Formless began to ascend, and his wings started to make small noises. Slowly, he lifted his slender form into the air. Although he has wings now, his appearance still looked plain. Nevertheless, it helped Formless get a better overview and find a place with more dried food to enjoy. The more he ate, the more fascinated he became. Even though the food wasn't tasty, his entire body felt much healthier. Since getting his wings, Formless had started playing the role of a sniper from above, glancing down at the cockroach family. His wings were still new for him to use, so he observed and aimed at the cockroaches from above before swooping down to attack them. Each piercing attack on the cockroaches made them suffer, and Formless felt a strange satisfaction, just like Mitt, watching them suffer in agony. but when he switched to devouring them, it was a different feeling. Fawnless shuddered at the sensation. His tail was now filled with fluids from the cockroaches. He had eaten about 20 of them, but the system hadn't provided any new information, causing him some frustration. While complaining about the taste of the cockroaches, the status window displayed a new skill, chitinous exoskeleton, which significantly increased its defensive capabilities. That's quite significant for a weak Fawnless, but skills learned from cockroaches don't seem to have any effect. Tapping his bald head again, Fawnless felt disheartened, thinking that he needed to find prey with different exoskeletons. After evolving to that extent, Fawnless could live like other insects in nature, live longer, and no longer rely on food. But in this place, where could he find a creature with a sturdy exoskeleton? After a moment's consideration, Fawnless decided to run to another location to search for food. With his 6 long-jointed legs and sturdy wings, Fawnless leaped from one container to another and flew high above to observe a pair of cockroaches on a date. While the male cockroach was saying that he had a stomachache and needed to go to the motel for a while, the shadow of Fawnless covered his head. Fawnless leaped down and used his 2 ugly claws to clamp the cockroach's body. He stuffed the cockroach into his mouth for a taste while keeping an eye on the other one trying to escape into the crack of the container. It lunged straight towards the escapee, not allowing it to get away. However, Fawnless had forgotten that he was 100 times larger than the other cockroach. He bent his head and fell backward, angrily, staring at the cockroach that was about to flee. Indeed, he couldn't crawl in there, but his tail could. A sweet and savory plunge brought both of them down to hell, sparing them from struggling because, in any case, the body remained to provide nourishment for Fawnless. After munching crunchily, Fawnless heard the system announce the effect of eating meat. Perhaps he had eaten too many cockroaches, and eventually, the enhanced abilities of the cockroach species had gathered together, quickly changing Fawnless into a more robust-looking skin. He looked like a steel-armored beetle, swaggering around and admiring himself, suddenly remembering that the master of this ship was a human, also his enemy. From where he was standing, Fawnless used its supersensory skill to hear the distant sound of human footsteps approaching. Even though this warehouse filled with goods seemed like a good hiding place, Fawnless knew it was fragile and could easily be killed by humans. He needed to evolve faster, surpass the infant stage, and expand his range in the hopes of surviving more easily. After a long and tiring day, Fawnless knew that the game had officially begun, and he needed to step out of this ship's cabin. He crawled up the wall with his 6 legs towards the ventilation grill. To reach the cooling room next to the reactor, Fawnless needed to pass through this area. The place Fawnless was heading to was rarely visited by people, so he wouldn't have to live with a sense of unease. Using his pencil-like appendage, Fawnless thought that if there were any problems, he could simply break the reactor and escape. Behind the bamboo grill was a ventilation duct large enough for an adult to crawl through, but for Fawnless, it was too big, allowing him to move comfortably. However, as soon as he stuck his head up, he felt like it was being blown back by the fan's strong wind, which was running at full power. Fawnless thought it was fortunate not to have any hair because he didn't have to worry about the wind blowing it away, but the speed at which the fan was spinning here made him a little scared. He moved his pincer closer to remove the metal frame, revealing the spinning fan in front of it. Fawnless had decided he would face this challenge head-on if he wanted to get to the other side. Fawnless wanted to destroy the fan, but he didn't dare to because the system would definitely sound alarms everywhere. His only option was to take a risk and fly through it. Fawnless used his supersensory perception to find a gap in the fan and mumbled to himself that he had to trust his skills, but his head was covered in sweat. The supersensory perception allowed Fawnless to see how molecules moved in such a void and target a fixed point. Thinking that he had timed it right, Fawnless leaped up and struck his wings, pushing himself with all his strength to jump through the other side of the fan. Now or never, he plunged his head and neck over and touched his legs slightly to the fan, but his body remained intact and landed. Fawnless breathed heavily, thinking he had cheated death. Then he crawled forward, 3 legs and 4 wings, continuing his plan. He devoured a few spiders on the way until he heard people in a room below talking about some tests with a bored tone. They complained about the pressure of their work, wanting to go back to the countryside to farm and plant vegetables, but they only had $20 left in their accounts, so they couldn't do it. Fawnless, in the form of a space monster, was not interested in their conversation at all. Fawnless only paid attention to the clothing and designs here, which were undoubtedly from the United Galaxy group. They were super rich Earthlings living scattered across the solar system on giant spaceships, leading entire nations. Most players were native Earthlings, but here, the United Galaxy group aimed for what they called the Demon Alliance. Turning the claw and screw, Fawnless thought that only the rich group had the power to turn people into slaves. not only in the game, but also in real life. Faunless took flight into an empty room and landed, looking around to assess the situation. He started using his super sensory perception from this room to find a new direction instead of endlessly eating bugs. Faunless was born here as a newborn, but he didn't know what this spaceship was for. He hoped it was a training center for mutant warriors, where he could be trained and strengthen his body. And if this place was a center for spiritual research, Faunless thought he might learn a little secretly. If given the choice, he wouldn't hesitate to join the spiritual faction, but now, as a shapeless creature, it seemed challenging. While pondering the uncertain future, Faunless suddenly heard a cry for help, a tiny cry in his ear. He took cover behind a leaning column to see where the sound was coming from. Suddenly, he noticed a pinkish creature in a large test tube in front of him making those moaning sounds. It was a single-celled organism with the ability to store oxygen, one of the most useless species in its ecosystem. Faunless wanted to put that thing in his mouth to taste its flavor, but first, he used his supersensory perception to see what was causing it to moan like that. It turned out its whole body was plugged with electrodes and tubes, seemingly being subjected to some painful experiment. Faunless reached up and pressed the golden button on top, thinking it was probably the experiment stop button. Sure enough, the moaning stopped, and the single-celled organism suddenly thanked him. Without asking questions, his instinct urged Faunless to flee. He spread his wings and took flight into the air as the sound of approaching footsteps drew nearer, successfully landing his body on a high display shelf. Just in time as the main door opened, revealing a brown-shoed foot stepping inside. A woman with short hair, ignoring the pleas of an older blonde-haired person behind her. She held a cat in her arms and asked when the specimen 026 would have results. Hearing his request for times, she turned around and scolded, "Time is dead, so I don't agree." Her words pushed the man toward the specimens that looked like human heads on the shelf. She warned that if there were no results, the company would reconsider hiring him. Seeing the subordinates trembling like frightened rats, the woman called out the name and surname of researcher 80 Wei, then advanced towards the single-celled specimen, staring at it intently. She stated that if 80 could demonstrate the potential for something to happen with this specimen 026, then the position of the head researcher would be assured. The man stared blankly as she continued to speak. She added that if things went well, after securing the position of head researcher, there might be an opportunity to work with the Mars team as well. The man became determined upon hearing that the Mars team was very interested in the project. 80 quietly asked, "What about adding selenium?" No one had mentioned this before, so the woman was slightly surprised. But after a moment, she stroked the cat's head again, murmuring a question about whether they had tried using a stimulant to trigger a reaction from the lion hall. She leaned in to examine the single-celled specimen. She knew they had tried similar formulas before, but not selenium, so she wanted to use it immediately. 80 ran back to tell her that he had neutralized it, but the woman's stern words made Faunless watch them intently. In the end, 80 had to comply with her instructions and type on the machine as she directed. At first, she pumped in 0.01 milligram, then gradually increased it to 0.07 milligram. With each additional dose, the specimen reacted immediately, causing the woman to become intrigued and insist that 80 apply a full dose to see what will happen. She forcefully pushed the man out of the machine to eliminate any hesitation and pressed the pump button, injecting the substance into the specimen. The specimen writhed in pain, its body squirming and making small, explosive sounds as if it were about to explode, only to exchange the slowly fading smile of the short-haired woman. It seemed that she couldn't hear its pleas and didn't care whether it survived or not. Only the Faunless could hear it and was sweating in place of its gruesome fate. The excruciating pain finally caused the specimen to lose consciousness. The woman watched it transform into a completely different form from its original one before finally stopping. She even mumbled praise for the excellent results. Before leaving, she reminded 80 to redo the experiment soon, and the man nodded in agreement. However, the woman suddenly glanced back at the specimen on the high shelf, and it was clear that there was nothing new there. Full of unease, the Faunless looked down at the single-cell specimen, thinking that it had been calling for help earlier. His ugly teeth clenched tightly, and Faunless didn't want to appear at this time for fear of causing chaos in the plan. Having enough of wandering, he continued on his way to the planned cooling room, finding a place to focus on the ducts, far from human reach and sight, to slip into. Amid the room's loud noises, Faunless chewed on something in his throat and spat it out, using it to create a barrier between himself and the pile of ducts, comfortably lying on top. Next, he used his super senses to silently observe every movement on the ship, exploring every nook and cranny as if it were his own body. Silently lying within his web, which was filled with green fluid, he could move more easily when necessary. He wanted to find out how many people were on this ship, what they were doing, or if they were exchanging information with anyone. By the 4th day, his web was complete, and he could easily move back and forth between the ship's compartments and his hiding place, occasionally catching insects and spiders on the ventilation path. Most of the time, Faunless used to monitor his targets and collect internal information about humans. Over time, he observed that the woman would leave a room right on time to go to the research lab. Kisaragi Yujin is the head researcher on the ship, with a frail body and no combat abilities, but always be protected to the highest level. 2 days ago, an experimental subject escaped from its cage. Since then, Kisaragi has created a tracking device that works within a 2-hour range, successfully capturing the escaped subject. The Faunless sees this as a danger to himself because if he's being discovered and tagged with that device, he will sure to die. Faunless's disdainful gaze looks down at the woman below, thinking that he might need to deal with her to avoid future trouble. Suddenly, Kisaragi glances right at Faunless's location but doesn't see anything except the metal mesh on the ventilation path. She always feels someone staring at her, but every time she looks back, she doesn't see anyone or anything. When the bodyguards ask about it, Kisaragi doesn't say anything, just instructs them to leave. Faunless curls his tail and hides, his mouth tightly sealed in fear. He quickly runs away from this place, thinking that this woman is more sensitive than normal people, as if she has psychic abilities. Psychic abilities in this world include clairvoyance, empathy, thought control, and various other forms similar to superpowers. A few people are born with psychic abilities as a genetic trait, so Faunless has to think carefully about how to deal with her. Whether innate or not, Kisaragi always has bodyguards around her in a state of high alertness, so Faunless needs a meticulous plan to kill her. Faunless chews on various dried foods, and the system notifies him that he has a new skill, paralyzing poison. His mouth, full of jagged teeth, keeps moving as he silently assesses the new skill, which is very useful for someone as weak as him. A drop of this scorpion hybrid tail venom can render an adult unconscious, but it only lasts for 5 minutes, so he can only use it once. While calculating Kisaragi's potential, Faunless realizes he has up to 3 lives at stake. He spits out the dry rations in his mouth to the frustration. He consumes several energy bars and crawls out of his hiding spot to check the current situation because he knows that there's no way out in his current state. Returning to the laboratory, Faunless holds 2 energy bars that have just appeared, and the single-celled creature has noticed him and is whimpering for help. He can't actually save it, but he can offer assistance. So he crawls onto the container with 6 legs and tells the creature that he's brought some food. Using his claws, he tears the bars into small pieces and pours them into the tubes attached to the single-celled creature. It's been a long time since it had a proper meal, and it expresses its appreciation. As a seasoned expert in various life forms, Faunless knows that single-celled creatures don't have any special abilities. So why would Kisaragi expect a reaction from it? Staring at the sample creature, Faunless suddenly remembers that Yujin often holds a cat whenever she leaves her room. With his human experience, he knows that she cares deeply for the cat. An audacious idea occurs to him. What if that cat were to die? Would its owner reveal a weakness? Unlike Yujin, who is protected 24/7, the cat is always curled up, purring in her room. The cat wakes up and immediately stretches, arching its back and yawning with contentment. Before Faunless's gaze, it assumes the regal air of a monarch. After waking up, the chubby cat plays on the large bed aboard the yacht. Faunless guesses it must be fed with top-quality meat. He activates his supersensory ability to silently observe how the security gates here operate. Since Kisaragi is definitely not an ordinary crew member on the ship, it would be difficult to kill her with a single strike. Thanks to his ability, Faunless notices a network of laser beams crisscrossing the room's walls, making it impossible to move freely without triggering an alarm. Realizing that he can't simply jump out and kill the fat cat, he angrily slams his tail on the floor, making a thud sound. This startles the chubby black cat, and it immediately rushes over to where Faunless is hiding. It plants its 2 front paws on the metal panel, and the security system immediately alarms, summoning guards to the room. However, all they see is the cat going berserk and clawing at the metal panel. They must be thinking of scolding the cat for causing another false alarm. Feeling like cursing at the cat, they probably don't realize how many false alarms it has caused. Faunless quickly moves away to avoid being discovered too soon, feeling like a flipped turtle but luckily managing to escape. He curses himself for attracting unnecessary attention and suddenly has a strange thought about the bored cat, which seems so uninterested that it's yawning. Just a flick of its tail, and it dashes around like crazy. but the guards are acting nonchalant, as if they've seen it all before. With those memories in mind, Formless smiles to himself, thinking he may have found a way to deal with this situation. The cat returns to bed and rubs its body against it, looking like it wants to go back to sleep. Formless reflects on those events and chuckles to himself, feeling like he may have figured out how to handle the situation. The cat turns back to the bed, nuzzling its body into it, seemingly ready to continue sleeping. Suddenly, it hears a familiar rustling sound coming from the metal grate in the ventilation duct, and it lifts its head to look. Peering inside, the chubby cat sees a cockroach crawling around, and its eyes light up as if it has found a new toy. It playfully extends its paw forward to investigate, intending to have some fun. Little does it know that the metal grate is about to collapse. The chubby cat squeezes its plump butt through the ventilation hole, ignoring the loud warning bell. However, the board guards don't bother checking it out, as they see no reason to pay more attention to a cat than to a bunch of children. Since the cat can't go anywhere outside the room, the security team simply ignores it. Little do they know that the chubby cat has followed a few small cockroaches into the ventilation ducts. At every junction in the ducts, there's a cockroach waiting for it to chase. Before long, it reaches the end of the ventilation duct, where a group of cockroaches have already died and lined up. Excitedly, the cat leaps through the ventilation grill into a new area, meowing happily as it discovers a wide playground. Right in front of it is another cockroach twitching as if saying hello, and the cat stares intently at it. Little does it know that Formless is leaping down from above, with his sharp tail aimed directly at the cat. The stabbing attack delivers a paralyzing venom that causes intense pain and directly attacks the nervous system, making the black cat howl in agony. It struggles with all its strength, but the venomous sting is too deep, and Formless, who is hovering above, remains unaffected. In just 5 minutes of paralysis, the chubby cat has to accept its fate as Formless's sharp teeth devour it entirely. He bites into every piece of flesh and skin on the cat, which is tougher and harder to tear than the roaches. He can't help but let out a satisfied groan. It's delicious. Footsteps hastily approach down the corridor, and when the researchers realize it's Kisaragi, they quickly move aside without daring to interfere. The woman strides straight to the man sitting in the middle of the room and calls out, "Hey, Captain." He glances over and immediately sees Eugen's frantic expression, asking, "Where's my Caesar?" His calm tone and the mention that her Caesar is still missing irritate her, and she slams her hand on the table in frustration, wondering why it's been 2 hours and there's still no sign. Her face contorts with anger, resembling a demon, as she angrily shouts, "Caesar obeys strict mealtime schedules. Something must have happened, but why would Samuel raise his voice at Caesar for just a cat?" He calmly reminds Kisaragi that this is a spacecraft, and unless the cat has been captured by someone else or has managed to pilot an escape pod, it's still on the ship. Kisaragi could easily figure out such a simple matter, but the woman was too impatient and took out her frustration on the captain. However, Samuel remained unyielding and told her to wait. He secretly thought that making such a fuss over just a cat was ridiculous, but he didn't dare to confront Kisaragi because she was a noble from the capital. Now, he had to respond to her angry demeanor, admitting that he had detained the soldiers responsible for losing the cat. She demanded immediate punishment. Kisaragi's furious face pressed close to the captain's, and her threatening words squeezed through her gritted teeth, telling the captain he had the authority to enforce punishment. So why wasn't he doing it? At the sound of Kisaragi's anger, she seemed ready to bite the captain, making him so fearful that he spoke nervously. The witnesses in the room gasped, and the soldiers were furious when they heard Kisaragi demand the execution of their colleagues just because a cat was missing. Finally, the captain couldn't face this mad woman anymore, so he bowed and mumbled that he understood and promised to tighten discipline. While Kisaragi hadn't turned into a demon with that expression yet, the captain tried desperately to salvage the situation, pledging that he would ensure stricter discipline. Seeing that there was nothing more he could do, the woman touched her forehead and turned away, not forgetting to threaten that she would return in 2 hours. But if there are still no results, will she consider replacing the captain with someone else? Leaving the room with her gloomy expression spreading throughout the space, the captain, now furious, finally vented by slamming his hand on the table. Formless noticed the captain's helpless expression as he muttered about the damn cat's whereabouts and couldn't help but secretly chuckle. It's inside him, after all. During his leisure time, he opened the system interface and discovered that he had gained a trait called Wild Instinct after eating the fat black cat. Normally, the system allows players to combine related traits to create more powerful combinations. For example, combining a metal tail with spiked armor creates a metal spiked tail. After trying various creatures, he memorized all the fusion formulas in the game. So when he was mukbanging the unfortunate cat and saw that he gained the Wild Instinct from the fat cat, Formless was stunned because he had never seen anything like it before. Moreover, it could also be combined with supersensory, becoming the predator instinct. This is explained as a skill that allows Formless to sense threats based on acquired information, almost predicting the near future. He was eager to try it out, but it didn't go as expected. Supersensory was much stronger, but Formless still couldn't activate the future prediction effect. As he crawled quickly through the corridor, he thought this might be a trait that self-activates when facing a life-threatening threat, so he decided to test it later. Now, Formless is crawling quickly to see what she's doing, and she's probably going crazy. Sure enough, she slammed her hand down on the table and cursed alone in the room. The frustration of losing Caesar and the lack of progress in her research ignited her anger to the extreme. As Formless thought, Kisaragi is the type of person who only treats things she values well, so once something she treasures is taken away, she can't control her emotions. He chuckled maliciously, waiting for the right moment. In his effort, he had managed to divide the relationship between her and the guards. From the beginning, Formless had noticed that even though the guards didn't speak out, they were jealous of the black cat when it enjoyed better meals. The way Kisaragi treated them was also different from Caesar, and over time, the guards became increasingly resentful. In addition, her aristocratic background set clear boundaries between her and the guards or low-ranking soldiers when dealing with many unfair things that they dare not resist. So if given the chance, they would surely vent their anger on the detestable cat. When Caesar disappeared, surely no one wanted to waste time and effort searching for something they had hated from the beginning. Kisaragi's courage would raise a question. Do they still want to protect her or not? Kisaragi herself hated the guards, and she should find someone else to blame for Caesar's disappearance. So now, Formless was standing here with a smile on his face, having achieved his goal. Gradually, he reached his goal, finally stealing Kisaragi's genes for himself. The more she thought about it, the angrier she became. Unable to bear it, she stormed into the laboratory, reaching out and angrily touching the control panel of a specimen that she electrocuted to vent her anger. The unfortunate creature was shocked, but it didn't relieve Kisaragi's anger. She became even more furious and stormed inside, her eyes fixed on a single specimen inside a large container placed in the middle of the room. She looked at it with a deep grudge. As soon as she saw its trembling appearance, Kisaragi smiled without humanity and immediately pressed the selenium pump button. Seeing the agonizing and contorted specimen crying out, Kisaragi was delighted. She stood and watched for a while before finally pressing her finger on the stop button for the drug. A mixture of delight and anger still appeared on her face as she hadn't fully released her anger. Kisaragi left, leaving the trembling and contorted specimen behind, looking like a fragile flower blown apart by the wind. Formless, looking at the scene from above, couldn't stand the anger. He really wanted to eat this crazy woman. Suddenly, the feeble greeting of the specimen reached his ears. It was clear that the ugly creature, himself, was on the ventilation shaft and raised a branch to wave hello. Formless looked at it silently and decided to leave, not because it insulted that specimen, but because he had something to do. Instead of empty comforting words, he wanted to give it something truly useful, a form of revenge. After tormenting those boring specimens, Kisaragi returned to the captain's room, tightened her grip on his hand, and asked about the progress. Of course, there was no progress, which made her very angry. Calling the guy Samuel Yu, she had a threatening look on her face as she asked if he was challenging a noble from the capital city. Samuel was pouring cold water on the situation, and he was almost ready to say enough is enough. He said, "I'm the captain, and you should be careful with your words." But this crazy woman immediately retorted, "My husband can fire those captains whenever he likes, understand." Even though she mentioned that she was from the noble class, there were still limits. She shouldn't get herself into trouble. Kisaragi's angry words infuriated everyone in the captain's room, replacing Samuel as their target of anger. Formless, hiding on the ventilation shaft, could hear it all. The situation was becoming more interesting every day, just as Formless intended. All of these people wanted to rush in and start a fight. Unable to do anything, Samuel watched Kisaragi turn and leave the room, with two guards following closely to protect her. Stopping in front of the restroom, she angrily told them to wait for her to finish her business before returning. Her rude attitude made one of the soldiers frown as soon as the restroom door closed. A nod from him indicated to his teammate to use the restroom while they had the chance, like a bell signaling Formless that it was his opportunity. He quickly descended from the ventilation shaft to the restroom to seize the moment. Normally, a guard would follow Kisaragi into the restroom, but today they were frustrated with her behavior. Additionally, one of them was missing, which would leave this woman alone in the restroom. Thinking that the restroom was a private place and didn't require security devices, Formless excitedly rushed to the ventilation shaft above the restroom and looked down. He imagined that without a guard, this woman might be left alone in the restroom. Formless was thrilled and quickly descended into the ventilation shaft. And indeed, Kisaragi was there, bending over near the sink, splashing water on her face. Taking advantage of the noise she was making by splashing water on her face, Formless removed the ventilation grate and crawled up the restroom wall right behind Kisaragi, who remained unaware. He positioned himself, ready to use his sharp, poison-tipped tail to paralyze her. Quietly, he crawled up the restroom ceiling, positioning himself closely behind Kisaragi as she continued splashing water on her face. Kisaragi took a deep breath, thinking she had regained her composure, and calmly looked at herself in the mirror. Suddenly, a faint hissing sound echoed from somewhere. Kisaragi turned around in alarm, looking around anxiously. But when her eyes met Formless, he had already lunged forward, driving his tail straight into her. Being an ordinary, untrained person, Kisaragi was filled with fear, her mouth unable to utter a word. As Formless quickly sliced a basic cut across her face, he stopped on the opposite mirror, turned to look at the staggering Kisaragi leaning against the sink without falling, then twisted and leaped at her once more. This time, Formless successfully injected venom directly into Kisaragi's neck, making her feel the same pain as her own black cat. Her face was flushed with veins, her eyes rolled white, and her mouth frothed uncontrollably. Kisaragi gasped, her legs collapsing on the floor, and she fell to the ground unable to utter a word. The sound of something liquid falling in front of her attracted the attention of Kisaragi, who was trying to lift her head to see. Once again witnessing the horrifying scene, a monstrous creature was drooling and looking greedily at her head. She was so scared that tears flowed, her teeth clenched tightly, and she couldn't utter a word. Formless wondered how she was feeling. Was she afraid of an extraterrestrial creature that her eyes were seeing? Or was she angry because she could do nothing but shed tears without being able to resist impending death? Those things didn't matter to Formless. What mattered was that he wanted to devour her head in one go, as she bled in her body. Formless savored the moment when the information from her gene chain rushed into his bloodstream and up to his brain. His blood-soaked mouth slurped gulp, gulp, and quickly devoured it, feeling the missing piece for his potential finally appear. The status window indicating Formless knew it was true. He had enough conditions for evolution and asked if he wanted to use it. Formless opened his blood-stained mouth and laughed heartily. The system seemed to be joking with a strange question. As the more intensely red blood stain touched the word yes, Formless's head suddenly displayed countless blurry and virtual images. In essence, the door guards discovered him mukbanging Kisaragi in the restroom, so they fired all their bullets at him. By the end of the day, only his bloody, ugly creature's corpse remained on the ground. But when the image ended, Formless still didn't understand where that image came from. Scratching his bald head, he wondered if it was his hunting instinct predicting the future for him. He still didn't understand how to use it, but Formless predicted the guards were about to enter exactly as he had seen. So instead of running away quickly, he waited for the guards to step in. He crawled up the wall, leaving a long blood stain. But instead of running away, Formless waited for the guards to enter. Sure enough, he waited so long without seeing Kisaragi coming out. So he looked inside, and he was shocked to see the crazy woman lying in a pool of blood, cursing. Her head was covered by a pile of hair not far away. The unfortunate guard was still in shock, and Formless took off from behind and landed on his armored shoulder. He thrust the poisonous tip of his tail directly into the visor on the guard's face. A concise blow punctured the visor and pierced the guard's head. Blood splattered on the walls and floor like a burst water pipe, and the guard collapsed dead on the spot. Formless jumped off the guard, barely touching the ground beside Kisaragi, then leaped to another corner to avoid stepping on the blood. There was no time to savor the mixed cocktail of red and white blood cells. Formless was impatient and raised the ventilation grill, wanting to escape from this place. He didn't know when the guards' comrades would return, afraid they had some device to detect each other's life. So running back to the lair was still the best option. Formless ran back to his lair in a hurry. He used his supersensory perception to scan the entire ship from there to make sure everything was normal before looking up. Confirming the safety of his lair, he pressed the evolve button, feeling that his ugliness was suddenly worse. It was growing countless blisters, or rather, it was oozing out, along with the entire body of Formless, flowing out like someone pouring a layer of sticky glue onto his head. His vision was gradually being obscured, and in no time, they stuck together like dry glue. Formless's whole body was wrapped in a strange, dark brown cocoon. He couldn't see anything outside anymore, but he felt like he was a fetus curled up inside. He also felt a strange solution outside enveloping him, turning him into a different entity. He wanted to open his eyes to see how he had transformed, but he couldn't. He felt that his body was no longer his own, and his consciousness was like a bubble. Touching it would burst. He had done everything he could. Now he could only wait, not knowing how much time had passed. Formless remained in the stack of layers filled with green fluids that he had excreted for a long time, waiting until one day the fluid near the mouth of the cocoon dried up and fell into his hard cocoon. The cocoon's surface began to crack, tremble, and was gradually pierced by something dark trying to emerge. It was also an insect squirming in the cocoon, with 2 dark arms, only 4 fingers sticking out. The scene around him suddenly became obscured by a hazy smoke escaping from the cocoon. Formless extended his hand to move it, feeling somewhat different from his original limbs, but clearly, the 4 fingers gave him more dexterity. His jagged, crooked teeth had been replaced by sharp, evenly aligned ones, as if he had just had braces removed. Formless had now evolved his entire body to stand upright, instead of crawling on the ground like before. His entire body was covered in a dark, glossy skin, resembling an extraterrestrial creature. Kisaragi's death was quickly discussed to find the cause, led by the spaceship captain. The white-haired person on the left is the head of the medical team. They were examining the neck wound, which appeared to be caused by a small saw-like object. The others sat in silence. A grown adult dying in such a bloody state made the research team uneasy. Even Ju-Jin, the 7th member crew on the spaceship, were feeling anxious. Now, with her seats empty and no autopsy allowed, the medical team had to seek Samuel's permission, taking his opinion as the standard, but the white-haired man only sighed wearily. Samuel buried his face in his large hands, genuinely unsure of how to proceed. Glancing over at the head of security, Samuel quietly asked about the progress in finding the suspect. He replied that the ship's cameras didn't show anything suspicious, so all suspicions were focused on the restroom attendant in the adjacent cabin. However, when the captain asked if he thought the restroom attendant was the suspect, he had to say no. There was no information from the medical team, and security had nothing useful either. Samuel looked back at the empty seat and suddenly asked if anyone knew what had happened in the laboratory. Hearing this, the old men froze, their faces pale. No one on the ship knew that a genius in the research lab had her brain removed while still alive because she didn't listen to Kisaragi, and now she was floating in a container. Kisaragi's cruelty was the reason Samuel worried that she had such authority. When the death was made public, didn't that mean this whole ship would be doomed? Thinking of the dark future of everyone, Samuel made a bold decision. Everyone present had to come up with a perfect plan to ensure that no one would be held responsible for the crazy woman's death. One of the men with white hair suggested that it be called a laboratory accident, right? On the other hand, someone objected immediately, saying she was the head of the research department. Can we say that she was to die of food poisoning? A bald man with glasses eagerly suggested that she died of food poisoning, but he was immediately scolded by someone for his ridiculous reason. Just die on your own then. That's all there is to it. But the 4 men representing the 4 departments jumped in and scolded each other. Just when it seemed like a fight was about to break out, someone slammed their hand down on the table. The 5th person stood up to intervene, asking why everyone in the office was acting like a market brawl. The loud scolding made the 4 idiots sober up. Seeing order restored, the captain looked at the proposal, and currently, the ship is near planet C8. As soon as he heard that C8 was the territory of space dogs, the captain grasped that ray of hope and immediately asked, "Are you suggesting blaming the space dogs?" The others, hearing the reason, sat down quietly, and the captain remained silent, pondering whether blaming the space dogs for attacking the ship would work. Space dogs are the antagonistic faction that roams the galaxy to attack and plunder the enemies of the Galactic Federation. They are highly experienced in raids, so many attacks by experienced people from the corporation have been defeated as usual. It's a simple matter that everyone can understand. A mediocre research ship collides with space dogs, like a shoe being chewed off. Samuel fell into deep thought. If he reported to the Galactic Federation that their ship was attacked, and that an accident happened causing Mrs. Kisaragi's death, it would make sense. But what about the weapons? Samuel looked up and asked the counselor. Our ship's weapons are weak. Making fake evidence would be easy. As if waiting for this question, the other person replied immediately, I have some friends who can help. Although there was a solution, Samuel still had a headache. The head of a research department had connections with the raiders to seek help. The captain knew that he needed money to ask for help, but he never expected 100 million. Seeing Samuel's face turning darker, as pale as overcooked beef, the other person had to explain. Even the space dogs were cautious about Kisaragi, so they had to take risks, big brother. Finally, the hair gel guy's request was approved, and he bowed his head and thanked them before rushing to work. The tired captain was about to disband the crowd, When someone from the medical department asked how the corpse was doing, sir, he glanced over there, replied succinctly, "Preserve it and give it to the space kids." The perpetrator of that bubble mess is now admiring his new body after emerging from the cocoon. He is amazed, knowing that he has evolved even further, feeling like himself but with a significant upgrade. Stepping out, he starts planning his next move. Faunless realizes that with his current large size, he can no longer hide and sneak around like before. His new strategy will be to survive in order to hunt for prey. He absent-mindedly scratches his bald head while looking at the information board. He intends to see what he has to prepare for his next target. Faunless has evolved into level 1 larva with the sensory skills of a predator combined with acid blood. Before choosing this character, he already knew that there were a total of 6 evolutionary stages. After being a larva, he would become a pupa, then a pre-adult, followed by a full adult, and finally, evolution. Once a creature successfully evolves, it can survive in space without needing these cramped ships anymore. When a creature evolves successfully, all its secrets and origins will be publicly revealed. But not many players reach that level, including Faunless. There have been only 20 people who reach the final stage. For now, in this larval stage, Faunless knows that his species is still undefined, so he has to rely on himself to see what his final characteristics will be. The system asks him if he wants to see his current attributes. Faunless, of course, is curious because he thought he was the type with clear physical attributes. Turns out he is. His physical attribute is at 6/10, most likely due to his chitinous exoskeleton and acid blood. Although Faunless is a different creature than most chosen by players, basically, it's quite similar in terms of unlocking body functions. In the line below, his mental enhancement is currently at 1, 5/3, probably due to the sensory skills of the predator, but it's still not enough. He scrolls through his memories of creatures he has consumed, like cockroaches, spiders, and cats, but none seem to be related to mental enhancement. Feeling puzzled, Faunless remembers the woman he ate earlier. He couldn't finish her entire body in his haste, so the system didn't immediately report the function gained. However, it seems that Kisser Augie's mental strength has partially permeated him. He jumps out of his nest, wanting to find her corpse so he can consume it completely to absorb all the remaining mental strength. But getting to the ventilation duct takes longer than he thought because of his different size, making the duct smaller. A familiar smell reaches his nose, coming from the room below, spreading a pungent odor that makes Faunless stop and look closely. It's the smell of death, and his teeth tingle with hunger. Not because of Kisser Augie's corpse, but because he just stopped right on top of the roof of the morgue, where all the dead bodies are stored. The booming music from the headphones echoes, filling the space in front of the Kisaragi Jujin's corpse storage room. Mixed with it is the melodious humming to the rhythm of the music of the pharmacist who oversees the morgue, sitting idle with nothing to do. Suddenly, an unpleasant odor reaches his nose, and he covers his nostrils as he cautiously enters the morgue. To his surprise, as soon as he steps through the door, his eyes fall on a large, corroded pit on the floor. He becomes so engrossed in it that he doesn't notice the looming darkness behind him. Fear washes over him, and he considers turning to call for security. Faunless, who had been lurking from above, lunges directly at the man, his sharp tail piercing through from one solar plexus to the other. The entire body collapses without a second's delay. Having dealt with the guard, Faunless quickly finds the room where Kisser Augie's corpse is kept and pulls her out. He grabs the white sheet covering her and yanks it away, revealing the lifeless body lying silently. Because she belonged to the nobility, Kisser Augie's body had been preserved intact, with even her head taped half in place, which suited Faunless's taste. He immediately grabs her face, bringing it closer for observation. He feels no emotion other than a desire to consume her, making him curious about himself. How can he be so ruthless, even though his nature is essentially human? Looking at this head, Faunless feels nothing more than hunger, or as people say, adapting to the environment changes one's true nature. Since taking on the role of this unidentified creature, his disposition has become quite rotten. He opens his mouth wide, drooling, thinking that even if from the beginning, this savage and brutal creature was indeed his true nature, it's natural to salivate in front of food. For Faunless to survive, he had to kill, so he went along with the idea that this creature had to adapt. Whether it's a human or not, when they die, they become empty vessels on Earth. So, he is the Faunless that can completely devour humans to sustain himself. As he continues eating, his teeth suddenly bite into something hard and unyielding. Faunless carefully pulls it out of his mouth and finds a greenish object about the size of an egg on his tongue. He has no idea what this mechanical thing is used for. Perhaps it's a pacemaker. In any case, it's useless, so he crushes it between his four-fingered hand. As he's about to finish eating, a status window appears, indicating that a nerve organ segment has been separated from the human, allowing a creature like him to use it. Suddenly, He feels extremely foolish. Clearly, he can think without the need of a nerve system. So what's the point of this? But he decides to be optimistic and presses it, hoping it can combine with something to create a new attribute. Surprisingly, under his skin, red-colored threads emerge. Faunless finds it interesting as the nervous system grows outside, like a bundle of electric cables in a neighborhood. He presses the blood-soaked arm of the pharmacist onto the information panel in Kisaragi's morgue, pushing her inside. Then, he deals with the pharmacist next, savoring the taste of this man's muscles, which seems more delicious than the unathletic woman. He processes him as well, enjoying the savory taste of a man who seems to have often exercised. Faunless continues feasting in the room until his hunter's intuition provides him with an odd image. He turns his head towards the door and sees the guards have just changed shifts. Thanks to his heightened senses, Faunless can see that they are wearing the same armor as the previous guard he killed. There probably aren't many different sets of equipment, so they just keep wearing them. Looking at the pharmacist's lifeless body leaning against the wall, Faunless speculates that the pharmacist's replacement will arrive soon. And then the news of the space monster on board will gradually spread, causing panic. Knowing that he doesn't have the power to deal with the entire crew yet, Faunless needs something to help him buy time to become stronger. Suddenly, he notices that the acid from his body is eating away at something and producing thick black smoke. He remembers that the morgue is filled with chemicals used to preserve and process corpses. He grins widely and comes up with a perfect plan to disrupt the crew's mindset. Speaking of the Interstellar Alliance, which drifts within the solar system, it can be said that Earth is still their main headquarters. There are 5 companies contributing to the success of the Interstellar Alliance today, and the Yujin clan is one of them. Initially, the Yujin clan was a small company in South Korea, but they later acquired the entire nation as their territory. There, they had small planes and electric ships for transportation, an artificial sun for the ecosystem, and both Yujin members and slaves coexisted. Still in South Korea, but in a secluded area, there was nothing around the houses and fish ponds except vast land, the sound of plowing the earth echoing softly from a 5-day farm laborer enjoying the joy of farming. Behind Jingwoo, 2 other men in suits stood solemnly waiting under the sunlight. After a while, as if he had finished his work, the man stood up and looked at an elderly man and a young man, receiving a nod from the old butler. The young man with glasses then approached to report about the young lady. Jingwoo was quite astonished by what he heard, and every word from the guy made the distant butler break into a cold sweat. As soon as Kisaragi's name was mentioned, the other person smiled as if wanting to know news about his third daughter who was far away. But the atmosphere turned gloomy when they heard that the young Mrs. Communicator had been destroyed. Jingwoo raised his farmer-like face, laughing slyly in disbelief, and said he hadn't given Kisaragi any difficult tasks. He reassured himself that he hadn't assigned anything challenging to Kisaragi. He was reporting the last signal received near C8, the territory of the space dogs. The farmer guy suddenly approached with a contemplative look. Jingwoo's right hand, gloved, unexpectedly landed on the young man's shoulder. The other hand thrust the shovel straight into the solar plexus. The guy was thrown away quite a distance, landing on the blood-soaked ground. He shivered in disbelief that this seemingly gentle farmer guy was now continuing to strike the shovel into his head until he was dead. The man tossed the shovel aside, calmly turned around, and told someone to remove the body. Then, he casually folded his hands behind his back and advised, "I don't need to hear any unasked questions. You all should know that you're just tools, right?" The person behind him bent down and walked away, leaving him alone, reaching into his pocket to search. The price to support Kisaragi was 10 billion, equivalent to the cost of a new battleship. Jeans hadn't even been enhanced yet, so how dare the space dogs lay their hands on her? Wiping the blood off his face with a towel, Jingwoo still wore his innocent expression, wondering who could be bold enough to harm the noble Yujin. Suddenly, I remembered that Kisaragi's ship was owned by Samuel Yu, right? The butler behind him, with a respectful tone, continues to mention Samuel's clan. He says that Samuel has been near Titan with the Edgerton gang lately. Raising his head, he denies the notion that Edgerton would dare harm his daughter because they are cowards. Turning to the butler for his opinion, the old man replies that he doesn't suspect TNC. Those eyes finally open with excitement, mixed with a hint of malice that is nothing like a farmer's. Outside, TNC and Edgerton may have conflicts over planetary control, but all businessmen know that they are colluding with each other to gain control. Edgerton's money comes from TNC, so they must be cooperating to vie for control. He turns back to look at the smug face and asks if the old man thinks so too. The butler nods, saying that the TNC clan leader always craves the position of the master, so both sides are targeting the Yujin clan leader, which is him. He laughs heartily, but just a second later, his expression changes. If they have already taken action, the Yujin family is also ready to retaliate. He turns to tell his butler that he has assassins near the C8 planet and needs to order them to act immediately. The butler, respectful but not asking unnecessary questions, knows that blood is about to be spilled. The master in front of him is rising silently. Samuel, you and all those related to the ship, quickly bring them all here for me. His face looks like that of a killer growling. Anyone who touches my stuff will die. Samuel's legs went weak and he was trembling, unable to say a word, as the scene inside the body storage room looked like a Bond battlefield. Medical personnel were covering the burnt bodies, and black smoke was rising in clusters. The captain of the medical team questioned the security personnel and found out that, due to seeing smoke initially, they went to check and found a fire. They only knew up to that point. When they confirmed that there were burnt bodies, they called the doctors immediately, so the security personnel were just guarding outside. The head of the medical team, upon seeing the burnt bodies inside, couldn't recognize who was who, so they determined based on items on their bodies. Suddenly, she thought of something and asked the staff if all the bodies were already here. She replied yes, and her scared eyes made the head of the medical team interested, attracting Samuel's attention. Adie's voice trembled as she told Samuel to gather all the team leaders immediately. Another chubby man sitting where Kisaragi was makes it a total of 7 people who are startled when they hear about the disappearance of the bodies of the security team and the research team leader. Samuel is the most terrified. A dead body is not as scary as losing the body of Mrs. Yu Jin. The head of the medical team also didn't know much, but it's true that he double-checked and confirmed that only those 2 bodies were missing. Moreover, the chemicals in the nearby storage room could potentially cause a fire, but it's very unlikely. The risk management team leader immediately agrees with his suggestion, thinking that someone intentionally set the fire. They begin to speculate about who could have done this, and as soon as the head of the medical team assumes it might be an extraterrestrial life form, the chubby man next to her loudly interrupts her. Realizing he spoke out of turn, the head of the equipment department had to fake a cough to avoid further discussion, and the meeting was redirected towards the missing body of the research team leader. Samuel's face turned red. He had said earlier that they would hand over the body to the docs on C8. He immediately stood up and demanded that they need to find that body. As soon as AD mentioned finding the culprit, Samuel erupted in anger and curses. "Is it my fault? You guys need to coordinate better, or else we'll all be retaliated against," he shouted. The entire room fell silent because everyone knew that once this was resolved, they would all be in deep trouble. Only the risk management team leader remained calm and suggested that they would meet with the space dogs right after the meeting. According to Samuel's preference, he still wanted to keep this matter hidden, so they could search for the body on the ship without any interruptions. The hair gel guy nodded, understanding Samuel's intentions. He then approached the head of security and told him that they must find the culprit. He also reminded him that all crew members must be investigated in any way possible as long as they find the culprit. Formless above heard everything they said to each other, including the threatening insistence of Samuel to find the culprit, and everything was going according to his plan. At first, Formless didn't know how to create fire inside the body storage room, so he gathered everything and poured it onto the floor. Then he added a few drops of his acidic blood to the mixed chemicals, and in the blink of an eye, a fierce fire erupted, incinerating all the bodies. However, Formless didn't anticipate that they would resort to the extraterrestrial life form theory, and even try to collaborate with the space dogs just to cover this matter. The risk management team leader appeared and phased, indicating that he had likely already established connections with those unruly individuals. Formless wanted to collect various genes from those space dogs, but if he did that, he would definitely have to reduce the number of human heads on this ship. Suddenly, his attention shifted to someone else, the chubby equipment manager who was trembling like a lost soul. It was him, with his furtive and suspicious demeanor. He looked like he was stealing something. The chubby guy placed his chubby hand on the warehouse door and slipped inside like a gust of wind. Formless found it strange immediately. Why would the equipment manager be so sneaky in the cargo hold? He crawled along the ventilation ducts to peer into the room, wanting to see what secrets this guy was hiding. Inside the room was a container that Formless's super senses couldn't penetrate. He only knew that its security was higher than in other areas, and the walls were thicker, which piqued his curiosity even more. There must be something very important inside. Based on the chubby guy's actions, Formless decided to shift his focus from the blonde head of the medical team to him. The chubby guy slammed the glass onto the counter, making a loud noise that startled his subordinate into realizing that something was wrong with his manager. The way he was drunkenly and loudly drinking suggested that there was something mentally wrong with him. The man was clearly afraid. His self-blame was overwhelming him. He blamed himself for believing the words of a black market broker a few days ago, buying some ancient relic eggs or something with the intention of selling them for profit. At first, he had planned to transport the eggs to the waiting ship for a future deal. He never expected that he would carelessly forget to close the lid, causing one of the eggs to hatch and disappear without anyone knowing. Now he was terrified, fearing that the creature from that egg had consumed the bodies in the morgue, afraid the captain would discover it and eliminate him, so he turned to alcohol for solace. The more he drank, the sadder he became until he couldn't take it anymore. He stumbled back to his quarters, swaying back and forth, and even though the bartender wanted to kick him out, he just kept drinking. Near dawn, he staggered back to his room, stumbling and muttering to himself about the mistakes he had made. The hangover led him to want nothing more than to sleep. But suddenly, a chilling feeling washed over him, sobering him up. The corridor behind him was eerily quiet and dark. He was filled with cold sweat, and his sobriety returned for a moment as he yelled, "Who's there?" The hallway behind him made a strange noise again. This time, he was genuinely scared and turned around to look, no longer swearing. To his horror, he saw something like a wriggling tail moving across the floor. Terrifying thoughts raced through his mind. This time, he was too scared to yell again. He turned to run, tears streaming down his face as he imagined some monstrous creature hatching from the egg in his mind. The bizarre thoughts overwhelmed him, and he felt like he was going to wet his pants. He ran, his thoughts merging with his drunken stupor, his heavy stomach pressing against him, and he pounded his index fingers repeatedly to open his room door, hoping to escape. He collapsed on the floor. The drunkenness mixed with dizziness, and the heavy stomach pinned him to the ground. He clung to the emergency phone high above, unable to reach it. All of his actions froze as the sound of a heavy pounding on the door echoed in his ears. It was getting closer, and his face was filled with saliva and tears. He turned to look back, feeling a growing sense of fear that choked the air around him. Dread overwhelmed him as he saw the door open from the outside, and Faunless emerged, grinning with sharp teeth, terrifying him. The fear was so overwhelming that he couldn't even scream, just stared at the open mouth before him. Tears welled up as the game ended, and he heard the snapping sound filled with regret. All 100 pounds of flesh on his body had been devoured by the Faunless. He closed the cabin door and began to search the messy room, knocking everything on the table to the floor. Given the simple habit of this man who would run off to drink whenever he had free time, it was not surprising that his living quarters looked no different from a dump. As Faunless picked up stuff from the floor, he thought with satisfaction that the captain should be grateful to him for helping him clean up the waste of his wages. But when he looked at the mess on the floor, he wanted to curse the equipment manager, who lived no differently from a pig in its sty. Clothes, books, and equipment were scattered on the floor, so dirty that Faunless searched for a while and found nothing, just feeling tired and frustrated. The woman hanging on the wall in the picture also looked sexy, but in Faunless's eyes, she was no different from a doll. He guessed that he had become an undefined creature and had no feelings for the girl. He skipped the picture and searched the table. The employee ID card that he was looking for fell out of the yellow notebook. He had what he needed, the employee card and the fingerprint of the equipment manager, ready for action. Before that, he needed to clean up this place, so he decided to eat right away. But the taste of this man wasn't very good. Other than fat and alcohol, he couldn't taste anything, but it was nutritious, so he tried to eat. Cautiously avoiding the camera's sweeping path in the darkness, Faunless inserted the card into the equipment room's card reader, added a hand covered in blood that still recognized the fingerprint, and the door opened, bringing in the cold air. He walked along the corridor filled with freezing containers, curious to see if there were any sweet secrets here. A place with a separate laboratory and so many freezers like this was definitely a sign of smuggling. Suddenly, Faunless saw something in the corner that smelled familiar. He looked closer and saw that they were all eggs of unidentified creatures neatly arranged in compartments, with one in the middle that had hatched and was empty inside. Lifting the shell, Faunless thought deeply. Could this be what he crawled out of? It turns out that he used to be a commodity smuggled by that fat guy, right? Faunless thought so because in this game, the starting point of the unidentified creature was not in the spaceship, but in a pile of debris made by the mother. He wasn't sure about the previous part, but looking at the traces here, he could guess that a young one had hatched, crawled out of the container not long ago, and died of malnutrition. Just as he died, he entered the control panel, so there was a scene of entering the game as a starved scorpion, dropping his own eggshell down. Faunless muttered that maybe from the beginning, he liked to eat cockroaches because of the instinct of the creature in his body. A minute of mourning for the dead young one replaced by him began. Not long after, Faunless felt extremely strange. Having what kind of species, he was already an unidentified creature but pretended to be polite. To act like a real creature, he picked up the other eggs and chewed them in his mouth, crunching them according to the instinct of the unidentified creature. The first one to hatch will eat the other eggs. Licking his lips after finishing the eggs without any information appearing, Formless glanced at the array of things stored here, thinking to himself that he didn't believe eating all these food wouldn't make him grow at all. Sure enough, there is work, and there is a way to get there. Now the formless larva has acquired the skills of mimicry and enhanced physicality to 8/10 points, while his spirit has increased slightly to 2/3. As he explored and fought, he realized that he had wasted time like this at Kisaragi, who did not bring mental strength to him at all, but provided summoning organs that were not useful other than for pleasure. But being a monster cannot be too greedy. He swung away from there, secretly thanking the manager for giving him the opportunity to eat many rich things. If not, these skills would have to be looted in the middle or near the end of the game. He wouldn't be easy to evolve quickly like that. Moreover, the characteristics and skills given by the system are all things that are useful for dealing with the crew. From now till the space dock crew comes to collect the Kisaragi's bodies, Formless has to become even stronger because no one knows how dangerous they will be. Wait for it, those genetic genes Formless has targeted, they must go into his stomach. On the Galactic Union ship, every day is busy welcoming returning exploration ships. The technical staff is busy from morning until lunchtime, and as soon as working hours are over, it's time for overtime, just like their daily routine. They put down their tools, let out a sigh, and headed to the cafeteria. While scooping their food, they engaged in conversation. They couldn't understand why the higher-ups insisted on constantly checking the spaceship's combat readiness. Fincher didn't want to discuss work during mealtime, but Scott, sitting across from him, couldn't keep quiet. Leaning in, he whispered to his friend about the rumors that the higher-ups were preparing for a battle with the metallic shell creatures. But what was even more surprising was the rumor that these creatures had been on the ship from the beginning. Seeing the surprise on Fincher's face, Scott continued, saying he hadn't noticed any strange odors in the air lately, unlike the metallic creatures. One of his kitchen colleagues told him that 2 crew members had disappeared last week. Fincher was about to take a spoonful of food, but dismissed the nonsense of the gossip. Suddenly, someone nearby overheard their conversation and chimed in. They mentioned that they had heard that the equipment manager had gone missing, resulting in a promotion for the cargo manager. Finally, Fincher nodded in acknowledgement of the news about the disappearance, but he wondered why the higher-ups remained silent. Scott and the others were excited because they thought the silence was to avoid frightening the crew. However, what concerned Fincher most was how this might be related to the maintenance of the combat engine of the exploration ship. No one had any answers, leaving Fincher feeling extremely frustrated. He picked up his tray and hurriedly left the cafeteria to avoid hearing more nonsense. Before leaving, he couldn't resist cursing his friend Scott. Let's put it this way, that night Scott was still working overtime, crawling under the spaceship with a flashlight to make repairs as ordered by the boss. He had his eyes wide open, focused on his work, and didn't join his colleagues who went out for a meal. His hands never stopped, and he only instructed his colleagues to get him a good bottle of water if they found any. And then he continued working alone in the vast storage room. As he was diligently fixing things, suddenly, he heard a colleague calling out to him from outside. He was about to ignore it, but the call persisted, knowing that the person was working, and kept calling his name. Scott, irritated, came out to see what Cameron urgently needed. To his surprise, there was no one outside, and he thought Cameron was playing a hide-and-seek game. However, Cameron's voice from the landing field continued calling Scott's name, asking him to come over. As soon as Scott showed his face, the calls grew more urgent. He hesitated. It was dark inside. Why hadn't they turned on the lights? What kind of game was this? Cameron said he was looking for something and needed Scott's help, sounding quite annoyed. Scott reluctantly turned on his flashlight and ventured inside to see what was going on. After just a few meters, Scott had to cover his nose. There was a strange metallic smell, different but overpowering in the air. He continued forward, asking Cameron where he was. The urgency in the other person's voice quickened his steps until he stepped on something and fell, rolling to the ground in pain. Scott finally realized something was amiss. Despite having turned on his flashlight, it was still pitch dark in here, and he couldn't see the way ahead. Cameron had led him in here to find something. Suddenly, he remembered the rumors about disappearances and metallic creatures, and a shiver ran down his spine. The sound of footsteps approaching from behind suddenly brought a glimmer of hope. Scott was about to turn around to ask if it was Cameron, but the response he got was eerie. A dark hand from the void reached straight for his face, and from its mouth, eerie and chilling sounds of Imlim emerged, resembling whispers from the abyss. In the darkness, Scott couldn't see anything, but the sound and temperature of that hand on his face were enough to terrify him. An excruciating pain rushed over him, and Scott's cries for help echoed in the space for a few seconds before disappearing, followed by the insane laughter of the void. This mimicry ability was quite something. Half an hour later, Fincher brought a basket of various drinks to find his friend, but Scott was nowhere to be found. There were only some tools left behind. Fincher bent down, wondering why someone as dedicated as Scott would disappear in the middle of his shift. Suddenly, Scott's voice came, saying he was in the repair area, which caught Fincher's attention. Without any doubt, the blonde guy leaned in and asked what he was doing in there. The reason for looking for something seemed reasonable enough to Fincher, and he didn't doubt it. He just asked why Scott didn't turn on the lights. Scott's voice was concise, indicating he had found what he was looking for and on his way out. It successfully lured Fincher's footsteps inside. As he walked inside, following the path Scott had taken, Fincher noticed a flashlight lying on the floor. As he reached out to examine it, drops of blood from above fell onto Fincher's neck, making him jerk and look up. The red color on the palm of his hand startled Fincher, and he turned the flashlight horizontally and vertically to illuminate the darkness. He saw blood dripping right in front of him, and a familiar face, drain of blood, floating in front of him, held by the void, hovering not far from his face. Mockingly, the void imitated Scott's voice. "Yeah, I'm right here, my friend," sending chills down Fincher's spine. As he devoured his latest prey, the shapeshifter wondered if he was out fishing, going from one name to another and swiftly putting them in his mouth without much effort. He couldn't help but marvel at how convenient his mimicry skill was. This skill wasn't acquired by eating the eggs of his own kind, but rather from a creature called the red worm. The red worm was a giant creature that lived in the desert and was exceptionally skilled at mimicking the sounds of other creatures to lure them closer for a meal. So, even in the harsh, food-scarce desert, they continued to grow to a very large size. The red worm eggs happened to be among the things the shapeshifter could find in the cargo storage room smuggled by the fat guy. He obtained the genes, but not in their entirety, so he could only replicate a portion of its abilities. Currently, the shapeshifter could only mimic the voice of the last creature he had eaten. But these two guys lying here had proven that this skill was quite useful to him. Thinking about eating one of the guys from the cooking team tomorrow, the shapeshifter immediately thought of Cameron, who was familiar with Scott, which would be a perfect fit. He licked his fingers a few times and then stepped out of the maintenance area, opening the ventilation grill, quietly wondering how that slime was doing. Squeezing himself inside, the shapeshifter mumbled to himself. Calling the slime wasn't quite right, but since the single-celled organism was so long, he decided to call it number 26 from now on. He was contemplating whether he should visit it when the excavators below suddenly rumbled, capturing its voice as it greeted him. At first, the shapeshifter couldn't believe that his nervous system could be used to pick up signals from other creatures through a neural frequency. He fiddled with a bundle of nerve tendrils, testing, "Hello, how are you?" To his surprise, he received the response, "Today, I'm very hungry." This single-celled creature had already learned to string new words into complete sentences. Could it be that the selenium had some effect? He manipulated his nervous system and replied to number 26 from a distance, saying that he couldn't bring food today. It bombarded him with questions about the reason, but the shapeshifter simply responded with no. Hearing the disappointment in the single-celled organism's voice, the shapeshifter didn't want to take the risk of delivering food, since the path to the laboratory was now very dangerous. After the captain went missing, the security team had maximized the laboratory's protection, so he didn't dare to risk bringing food to number 26 for several days, only occasionally chatting. Perhaps it also understood, so they agreed to meet another time, and the shapeshifter tried to push the feelings of guilt away. He pushed his body through the narrow ventilation passage, thinking that it would be easier once he evolved into an insect. The more he thought about it, the angrier he became. The conditions for evolving into an insect were too strict. It required him to kill and absorb 10 physical beings and 10 individuals with psychic abilities. On this ship, it was clear that everyone was a regular human. There were no individuals with psychic abilities to evolve from. Faunless was about to crawl back to his resting place when his enhanced senses caught the sound of someone talking. Looking from behind, he could recognize that this was the risk management team's captain. However, the way he spoke was different from the others on the ship, so Faunless stopped to listen. The person on the other side said something strange, and Arnold immediately asked if the orders came from the base. It was like realizing that he had slipped up, and he told himself not to doubt anything and just follow orders. Continuing to step forward, Arnold reported that Kisaragi Jujin had been eliminated, so everything here was going smoothly. There was nothing until he mentioned that all orders from Captain Samuel had been revoked, and that's when Faunless started to pay closer attention, pressing his hand against the door to his private room. Arnold reiterated that all orders from the base were being executed. Monitoring everything from above, Faunless knew immediately that Arnold was talking to someone outside of the ship. He raised his hand to his chin like a real human, He realized that this cunning individual was secretly doing something by manipulating the ship's captain. Indeed, the next day in the meeting, Samuel seemed to go crazy, banging on the table and blaming the security team for their incompetence. 2 more days, and they would have to face the space dog. But they couldn't find the culprit, and there was no solution. Everything piled up on Samuel's bald head, making him furious. Whenever he heard an apology from the security team, he would scold them angrily. In addition to reporting that there were currently 8 people missing, including the head of the equipment team, he scolded everyone from top to bottom. It was like a comedy show for Faunless, who was watching from above, and he covered his mouth, laughing silently, knowing that they would never discover the culprit who was among them. He settled his chubby body into a chair in despair, and Arnold's voice from the other side agreed with the security team, which stopped Samuel from continuing to scold. "I've had a forward check done, and I'm sure the security team has done their best." Those words to Samuel sounded like excuses, saying that they had done everything they could, but there were no results. With a confident tone, he said, "I can prove it." Arnold claimed that he had used human standards, concluding that if it was a human, they couldn't escape such a large-scale siege. Although the rumors of a metal monster were just words, what attacked the spaceship's crew could very well be an unidentified entity. Arnold's words changed the atmosphere in the meeting room, and even Faunless wiped his smile and felt a bit sweaty. The long-haired man who opposed him wanted to explain to Arnold, how could the ship say I not detect any strange creatures on board, especially when the entire equipment management room's freezers were broken. Arnold had considered this, but the sight of the entire equipment management room's freezers being smashed proved part of his statement. He solemnly reiterated that who knows if something had escaped from there. That's true. And the old men in the room fell silent. Sensing danger, Faunless also realized that his buffet meal had been excessive, and the crime scene he had disguised was now becoming a clue. Samuel refused to believe that, and he wearily raised his hand to his chin, asking if there were any clues or speculations. Arnold immediately pointed up, saying that there was one place we hadn't searched yet, the ship's ventilation ducts. Looking up seriously, he explained that all the ventilation ducts were nearly 1 meter wide, enough for the entity to move inside and kill. Faunless rolled to the side to avoid their gaze, but his ears still caught the captain's suspicion without any basis. Because Arnold was sure that the metal creature was only 80 centimeters tall and could easily crawl into the ducts to kill. Feeling that danger was imminent, Faunless decided that this guy needed to be dealt with as soon as possible. The meeting room's psychological manipulation followed Arnold's direction, and he even suggested capturing it and handing it over to the capital's nobility for punishment. Once it was proven that Kisaragi was eaten by that monster, everyone on the ship would be pardoned. That sounds reasonable, but what about the approaching space dogs? If there are no corpses to hand over to them, we'll have to fight, won't we? If we're going to charge, we need to charge together. And Samuel silently listened to Arnold's words that we must fight. The important thing is to deal with the monster first to reassure the crew. As soon as Samuel approved the plan, Faunless rushed back to his den. He tightened the ventilation grate while thinking that the day of the battle was surely approaching. With Arnold's decisive approach, his choice to check the ducts was understandable, and once done, it would definitely seal it tightly. Jumping down from above to his nest, Faunless silently pondered whether he should run or fight. All the hallways had cameras, so Faunless had to assess the situation and make a life-and-death decision. Should he run or should he fight? He lay down for a while, then sat up, recalling Arnold's words during the meeting. Arnold's evidence was so convincing and precise, and his determination to deal with the monster was clearly not for show. The more he thought about it, the angrier Faunless became, his frustration rising. How could they want to capture a highly evolved creature like himself? Could those people really face him with confidence just because they thought he was a wanderer from another planet who landed on the ship? He was very angry, silently cursing, even though he didn't have proper arms and legs and his head was bald. Nevertheless, Faunless was still a fearsome species that could bite off its prey's neck. His sharp teeth opened wide, and his mind only thought of one word: fight. He roared in anger, realizing that if they had planned to fight a creature like him in the ventilation ducts, they would surely be at a disadvantage in the confined space. And with just a few inexperienced soldiers, Faunless would teach them what it meant to be foolish and reckless, leading to consequences. His deep, booming voice echoed, and he would show them what a space hell was like. With determination, Faunless got to work immediately because he didn't have much time left. He pressed his hand to the surface of his nest and sent his super senses radiating out from the center. His abilities now could spread throughout the entire ship, grasping the structure, location, and movement of the enemy. Faunless's range had also expanded, covering the entire spaceship. It was as if a parasitic creature was spreading an infectious disease to its host. After peeking into various rooms, Faunless found Samuel and the team leaders gathering in the main control room. Of course, Arnold was not absent, as this plan had been laid out by him. Just as he had predicted, the armed soldiers under orders were divided into two teams, starting from two different directions. Having a rough idea of the human plan, Faunless had a plan of his own to execute. He would have to go out on his own, relying on his weapons and the specific movements of the enemy. Finally, the day had come when Faunless would face the entire spaceship alone. On the control room screen, the reports from the teams were starting to come in, including Team A and Team B, each with 3 members assigned. All of their images were being transmitted live on the large screen in the control room. Arnold watched the situation unfold, silently chastising himself for not being more cautious after the creature had killed Kisaragi. His gaze seemed to pierce through this place, reminding himself to eliminate any variables before the personnel from the base arrived. So today, that creature had to die for the plan to proceed as intended. Initially, the paths of the team showed nothing unusual, with the 3 members of each team sticking closely together. Only B3 suddenly reported a weak radio signal, needing to pause and fix it before proceeding. Arnold didn't get involved in that matter, but instructed the control team to tell the teams to move slowly and look for any signs of difference along the way. His gaze never left the screen, and suddenly Arnold instructed the control team to have Team B3 move on. They had been there for a while. However, the situation with the camera on that person seemed to be frozen as it pointed downward. The control team had to go there to check immediately. Why was the camera constantly looking down at the ground like this? The problem seemed to be interference with the signal. After 2 attempts, he finally stood up to adjust the view of the hallway. Seeing this, the control team instructed Team B2 to return to regroup with Team B3 for safety. According to their plan, B2 and B3 were heading towards each other, while B1 remained stationary, awaiting further orders. But when the two teams met, a scream of pain echoed through the control tower, making everyone's faces turn pale. The control room was filled with questions, and it took a while for someone from B2's radio to stammer out, "It's here." After that, all that could be heard were screams, making Arnold tense up and grit his teeth. The control room reported that they had lost contact with B2. The camera had been destroyed, and nothing was visible on the screen. Arnold turned pale, and AD and the bald man with glasses looked even more terrified, frantically asking about the young man. No one knew what had happened. Looking back at Arnold, the risk management team leader needed to issue orders, but he stood there motionless. He needed to request instructions, but he remained stone-faced. Each team had members in mid-level armor, but there was no response. Even the seasoned assassin wasn't sure if he could easily take down the team like this, which is why he was so terrified. Pointing at the screen, Arnold ordered all security personnel to fire immediately upon seeing any movement. The command to gather all of Team B was quickly acknowledged, but Arnold still felt uneasy. Earlier, B2 and B3 had encountered each other, but B2 was already dead, and this creature seemed to be adept at guerrilla tactics. All held their breath as they monitored the gathering of B1 with B3. When they arrived, the control room reported an unusual sound, making Arnold jump. They explained that they were at a 3-way intersection, and the echoing sound was difficult to determine, causing the entire control room to freeze. When B1 confirmed that it was the sound of B3, he finally breathed a sigh of relief. The whole room exhaled, and even the control room operator felt that everything was fine now. But when the command was given for B1 to report back immediately if they encountered B3, the response was eerie silence. B1 reported that they had been captured by the enemy, causing shock throughout the room. Arnold rushed over and grabbed the microphone to request a report on the situation. He heard a hesitant response, saying that things had happened too quickly and were hard to grasp. Arnold angrily shouted, "How could you be right there and not see it?" The room tensed as Arnold threw his earpiece on the ground and swore in vulgar language, lost in his own world of hatred. He wondered if the soldier was blind or deaf not to report back. As for what had happened, the control room didn't know because both B1 and B3 were not appearing on the cameras. Unless they actively avoided being filmed by the creature, there was no way they wouldn't accidentally capture even a piece of it. Thinking of this, Arnold's quick-witted mind paused for a few seconds before he picked up his earpiece. Taking a deep breath, Arnold asked the person on the B1 team who had reported earlier to quickly identify themselves and state their rank. The voice on the other end seemed very hesitant, but Arnold calmly asked them to quickly state their name and rank again. After a moment of silence, a playful voice in a different tone chimed in and asked, "Do you want to capture us?" The 4-fingered hand slammed hard on the remaining camera of Team B, which was pointing at the ceiling. The crack and the loud thud on it were so loud that it made the old team leader shudder. Legs trembling, they fell to the ground, and the screen displayed signs of complete damage. Arnold froze, not even responding to A1's call for an update on what was happening inside. It wasn't until they urged him again that Arnold finally ground his teeth and changed the plan. The camera destroyed by Formless's hand was smashed, and he crawled back to where Team B had been killed on the floor, muttering that he had taken down this team according to the plan. Thanks to the snippets of conversation from the people in the lab, Formless used the frequency of the nervous system to disrupt communication. He forced Team B to split up to repair the radio, and when they did, there were fewer people. This gave Formless the opportunity to subdue them with ease, pinning a bit of poison to their necks and feasting upon them. He licked his bloodied, white-stained teeth and continued to use his enhanced senses to find out where Teammate was. His enhanced senses moved through various alleys, gradually locating the location of Teammate after receiving the information about Team B's alertness. He rushed up the ventilation duct towards that direction, needing to tread lightly, as Formless could easily take down Team B simply because they had no information about him. Team A must have known that the monster was him, given his ability to mimic human voices, so Formless had to rival Lear and wait. The intersection up ahead was where they had to pass through, so Formless chose it as his hiding spot. He had a sinister smile while waiting, remembering that when people said intelligence was power, having too much information could turn into a poison. Not long after, Team A arrived at the intersection and immediately informed the command tower that the entire team would pass through the right path. All three members of this team stuck closely together, listening in silence as Arnold reminded them that this monster could mimic human voices and that they should open fire as soon as they heard a human voice. Just after the reminder, there was a loud cry for help in front of them. Without hesitation, the entire team aimed straight at that spot and fired green bullets vigorously, forcing Formless to hunker down and flee. After a moment of no movement, Team A stopped firing and intended to advance. Formless, however, emerged from behind, seizing A3 by the head. A earth-shattering scream terrified the remaining two members of the team. The person being attacked by Formless tried to speak, saying, "It's a monster, it's a monster." The control tower's voice echoed loudly over the radio, requesting that they shoot it to death, but they hesitated and reported that the monster was using A3 as a shield, and firing would injure A3. Arnold on the other end didn't care and ordered them to just shoot it, so the two members had to follow the order, raising their guns and firing continuously at him. Dropping A3, Formless hunched over and fled straight ahead, but at such close range, his chitinous skin couldn't withstand the bullets. His entire body was bleeding, but Formless kept crawling over the partition and then hunched over and fled, leaving behind scorched holes on the floor. The control tower did not allow them to retreat, so teammates gathered together to assess A3's condition. He was having seizures due to blood loss and the severity of the injury, and they used an electric shock to stop the bleeding. The wound was still oozing, but thanks to this, A3 would temporarily faint until they completed their mission and returned to rescue him. A1 and A2 continued to search for and hunt down the monster along the path he had just fled. A1 quickly noticed that Formless seemed to be injured. There was blood left on the ventilation ducts, and there was also corrosive acid, making them even more cautious. At another intersection, both of them hesitated when they looked at the narrower than usual ventilation duct. They had no choice but to enter. Report: A1 requested permission to inject enhancement drugs. Feeling the situation was not optimistic, he proactively reported to the control tower. He quickly received approval and pressed the buttons on the control panel to inject the drug into his body. His eyes lit up, and A1's entire body suddenly bent down to the ground in pain for a moment, trembling. Then his fingers became much stronger than before, easily crushing the metal floor. Both of them were filled with hatred and rage for that damn monster who had killed their teammate, and they advanced inside in a half-kneeling, half-sitting position. As they approached the smoky area, they looked down and found that this large hole seemed to have been made by the monster. They immediately reported to the control tower that this might be the escape route. Both of them were focused on looking down below to see where it led, so they didn't notice that Formless had lowered his head behind them. He put himself down too far away too quickly, making a loud noise. The soldier noticed it immediately and turned around, firing continuous shots at the monster. Darting through the green shots, Formless didn't slow down and continued to pursue them closely. He grabbed A1's head from above and swiftly jabbed his poisonous, pointed tail into his abdomen. Both of them tumbled to the side, right within A2's line of sight. He was furious to see his teammate being taken down. He raised his gun and fired relentlessly, disregarding Formless's tactic of using his body as a shield. From behind A1, Formless extended his pointed tail, but A2, who had been enhanced, quickly grabbed it and pulled it away. Then, he lunged straight toward Formless and delivered a punch to his head. Formless screamed in agony. "Die now!" but unfortunately, Formless was quicker and managed to escape. From behind, A2 shots rang out incessantly, but they still missed, while Formless had already crawled up a ventilation duct and disappeared. This made him go berserk, roaring and cursing in frustration. Formless leaped and quickly moved from one ventilation duct to another at the fastest speed possible. He was familiar with this area, and now he had a target, so he put his head down and ran even faster. He only stopped when he felt it was safe, and then he dared to think that these people were stronger than he initially thought. If he kept using the same tactics as before, he would surely die. Those enhanced bullets would catch up to him, and he wouldn't be able to escape. Scratching his bald head, Formless realized that he couldn't play guerrilla warfare anymore. Suddenly, he came up with a more effective guerrilla tactic. The ventilation duct where A3 was left behind after being hit by Formless. He was slowly regaining consciousness and heard whistling sound approaching. The camera was still working, but its lens was shattered. He couldn't report the situation to the control center, even though the chaos was causing him to whimper. He felt helpless when he saw Formless's head appearing. Indeed, he felt powerless, but in return, he only saw the monster approaching faster. A3 was nearly paralyzed with fear when he saw Formless approaching. He exhaled a white, calculated smoke. Formless didn't rush to attack, but instead brought his face close to the camera. This terrified A3, and he wanted to scream, but when Formless pressed him against the floor, all he could do was make a feeble noise. Formless's attack landed squarely in the middle of A3's abdomen, piercing through his armor. He pulled out the internal organs and chewed them vigorously. Formless ate faster than usual. His hand scraped off the flesh from the victim. After digging for a while, he stopped and let the armor fall to the ground. He lifted the empty helmet with curiosity and thought, this should be enough. He stared directly into the camera mounted on the helmet and used his monstrous claw to shatter it. The final image clearly captured Formless's face before the feed cut off. The control tower urgently informed A2 that A3 had been attacked. A2 ran for his life, despite the intense chest pain caused by the lack of air. Finally, he found A3 covered in blood, sitting against the wall. He tried to wake him up and shake him, but A3 remained unconscious. A2, infuriated, decided to press the treatment button to see if there was any chance of survival. But Formless's tail had already pierced A3's throat, leaving venom in A2's bewildered eyes. Holding his throbbing throat, A2 fell to the floor, trying to prevent the blood from spewing out. He trembled and hugged himself as Formless's hand pierced through A3's damaged armor. A2 hadn't considered the possibility of Formless masquerading as one of their own, and now he stared in horrified disbelief as the gruesome figure covered in blood emerged from the damaged armor and approached him. The way Formless stood up, staring at the soldier like a demon from hell, filled A2 with nothing but despair. He still had the throat clamp on A1, preventing him from communicating with the control tower. Quickly, Formless seized A1's head and jerked it backward. One hand gripped the crushed neck of his victim, while the other hand pulled the helmet down to bring their faces closer. "I'll savor this," Formless said. Bon appetit. A2 felt the excruciating pain surging from below. His throat was lifted higher, and he heard the skin stretching as if it were stretching for centuries. Formless extended A2's neck, gradually separating the head from the body, and he died instantly. He deliberately raised A2's head high to capture the gruesome scene of him bisecting the soldier on camera. He didn't know how the sound was in the control tower right now, but Formless knew they must be in great fear. With only one camera remaining, it was now zoomed in on the screen, and the entire control tower could see every detail as he crawled across the floor, crying and vomiting everywhere. The loud screams and commotion pierced through Arnold's consciousness, freezing him in place. Setting his foot on the air duct floor, Formless prepared for a high-speed run, mentally counting the 6 lives he had dealt with so far. Now, there were about 90 people left on the ship, and from now on, they would panic and prepare to fight with everything they had after seeing his warning about an 18+ scene. Turning a corner, Formless thought he had seen a weapons depot on their ship before, but he wasn't sure if there were plasma weapons, so now he rushed to investigate. Plasma weapons were heavy-duty, designed for spacecraft, mainly for attacking warships and tanks. Their destructive power was tremendous, and an individual couldn't carry one and survive a hit from it. Formless would undoubtedly be obliterated. He knew there were compact, lighter versions of plasma guns, but they were extremely expensive, so if they were here, it was likely the mid-sized plasma gun. Crouching close to the air duct leading to the control room, Formless wanted to make sure whether this ship had that kind of weaponry before taking action. The sound of footsteps echoed loudly in the corridor, drawing Formless's attention downward. He saw a large group of soldiers patrolling the area continuously. It seemed that they thought the creature was preparing to capture everyone, so they were using all their forces. However, Formless turned around and went in the opposite direction. He knew that the soldiers would gather at the last place he left traces to track him down. So he took advantage of the time to search for the heads of departments to start the chaos. Everything was in disarray. As he reached the control room, Samuel's furious yelling could be heard right beneath him. In terms of appearance, size, and characteristics, it was not mentioned in any of the records, so he was very angry. The swearing was like worshipping a deity in this place, and Formless observed how many department heads were down below. He chuckled with delight as if he were helping to reduce the ship's personnel. Saving money. Samuel must love this. Arnold was getting tired of Samuel's taunts and replied immediately, causing Samuel's face to darken. The creature was very intelligent and could mimic human voices, so better weapons were needed to handle the situation. Arnold quickly stopped Samuel's words. For now, they only had that much information, and they had to accept it, not wanting to waste any more time. Arnold said he would send soldiers to deal with it under one condition. Hearing the condition, Samuel was already unhappy, and when he heard the request to use plasma, he became even angrier. Before the captain could object, a voice behind him immediately said that plasma was only to be used when there were pirates attacking. This was inside the ship. Dragging it out and using it would kill everyone. The noise entered Formless's ears, and he was still considering whether there was such a heavy-duty weapon or not. But now they had revealed it all. Through the small air vent, he used his super senses to magnify his vision and see where the person he wanted to kill, Arnold, was. At the moment, the guy was near the screen, too far away from him, so he temporarily shifted his target to 80, who was standing frozen. Formless knew that this blonde-haired guy was the researcher who had been torturing 26 all day, so he was fine with giving him a taste of his own medicine. He extended his four-fingered hand and chose AD as his target. The sound of Formless piercing through the mesh was enough to make the control room turn around and look. But there was nothing they could do when the target of his toothy maw was AD's head. The researcher widened his eyes as he saw his face being crushed, screaming for a few seconds before falling silent. Formless lifted his head from AD's mangled face, making the department heads so scared they couldn't even run. He switched targets to the ones closest to him, quickly biting one department head's shoulder and using his tail to impale another. In no time, the control room was in chaos, people running, screaming, and dying. Even unrelated people were chased away by the monster. The guy tried to contact the soldiers to return to the control room, but before he could finish his sentence, Formless's sharp tail had pierced his throat, causing blood to spray everywhere. Behind him, someone was shooting green bullets into people, but it only caused itching and didn't make them bleed like enhanced bullets would. Turning around, he was surprised to see Arnold, whom he thought had run away with his tail between his legs from the beginning. Formless was laughing maniacally. Did these three guns bring so much hope to Arnold? He was about to leap over and bite this guy to death. Suddenly, the hunter's instincts exploded in his head, revealing countless images of Arnold shooting the shotgun at Formless and then receiving a strike from his tail in the chest. In that life or death moment, another gun pointed straight at his face and fired a powerful blast of plasma that blew Formless's brain away, successfully halting his frantic movements. His eyes widened as he stared at the weapon the guy was holding in his hand. Did the image he just saw not resemble a short-range plasma gun with high damage potential? Just one shot to the head or chest, or even just a grazing hit, would be enough to send him to the afterlife. This Arnold guy must be very close to the Eugene clan to get something like this. Indeed, those golden eyes spotted something in Formless's gaze. He dropped the short plasma gun to the ground and muttered, "I recognize you now." He pulled out the fancy short-range plasma gun right in front of the captain, leaving both of them stunned. They didn't expect this guy to be equipped with such a powerful weapon. Arnold pointed the gun at Formless, his mouth forming a confident smile as he said, "Even though I don't know your identity, I see potential in you as a versatile monster." His gaze turned dark when he mentioned Saihin Yu-Jin, saying that Formless resembled his master. He fired a shot of plasma with a much larger bullet than usual, prompting Formless to turn and run, using the room's partitions as obstacles to escape Arnold's aim. Seeing the molten trace left by the bullet, he became even more determined to kill Formless before his master arrived. Meanwhile, he hid behind the partition, whispering that the situation was not good, with a sweaty bald head and a face contorted in fear. He tried to stay calm and find a way to survive this terrifying crisis. Formless's teeth separated before they clamped together in a nervous chatter. He consoled himself in a dangerous game like this. He always won. Thinking back, carnivorous animals like bears, lions, predators, commonly regarded as symbols of violence in the world, are often thought to be confrontational beings that nobody dares to face. But the truth is, they are actually cautious creatures. If they are not related to food or a necessity for combat, They will try to avoid unnecessary fights. Excessive caution is the way of a predator, and when they transform into other creatures, they have deeply absorbed this lesson. Dodging a bullet while mentioning this to himself, Formless also took the opportunity to use his supersensory perception on Arnold, seeing that his heartbeat was steady, and it seemed that all those silly expressions earlier were just for show. Observing the familiar confident look on Arnold's face, Formless recognized the familiar scent of a hunter emanating from him, a seasoned hunter. He had just bent his body to jump over partition, and that spot had been blown to pieces by plasma shots. The gun in Arnold's hand seemed limitless. He could shoot as many rounds as he wanted, running like a mouse in a warehouse, afraid that he was shooting too enthusiastically and forgetting where they were. Samuel and another person had to shout to remind him that this was still the control room. Being careless here would get them all killed. Raising an eyebrow, Arnold replied that he would pay attention. Then he actively rushed in the direction where Formless was and fired several shots in succession. As long as he saw any sign of him, he kept shooting. This creature was too good at evading and dodging, which made Arnold curse angrily. But Formless, who was sober, did not fall into the trap, continuously using his supersensory perception to recognize that the continuous shots were just a trick to lure him. Arnold was actually muttering to himself about the group he had with him, calling all the soldiers back to the control room to save the captain and the head of the department. Formless tilted his head and deduced that Arnold just wanted to prolong the situation, not risk their lives. Primarily, it was to protect the two leaders hiding over there. Waiting for the soldiers to arrive in full force, they would coordinate together to capture the creature. He grinned and thought that these people were quite intelligent. About to bend down, he took a moment to think about how to kill these people before the soldiers arrived. Formless saw a fire extinguisher under the table and quickly grabbed it, pulling out the safety pin. He aimed it right at the center where Arnold was standing and sprayed it, creating a thick cloud of smoke. Arnold covered his nose with his hand and blindly fired 2 shots in the direction Formless through the smoke. However, the lack of visibility made it impossible for him to hit his target. Formless quickly moved from his spot, and the entire control room was filled with thick smoke, making it impossible to see anything. Arnold saw that the soldiers around him were lying in a heap without any fighting, so he shouted to get all the weapons out and stand still. There was no need to rush. In the thick smoke and the passive situation, Arnold deduced that he had to shout for everyone to quickly protect the captain and the head of the department. The unique gaze of Formless flashed amid the white smoke, seeing that this guy deserved a one-way ticket to hell because his predictive skills couldn't keep him alive. He attacked the nearest bad guy with his poisonous tail, closed his throat tightly to prevent him from shouting, and even took on the challenge of a meat mukbang right there. The sound of blood splattering mixed with the hissing of the fire extinguisher created an eerie scene. The soldiers had to shout, "Commander, where are you?" To the right, he responded, "I'm here, buddy." And to the left, there was a call that confused the soldiers. Arnold shouted, "Don't believe it." The monster imitated the sound of a human, but it had no calming effect. Instead, it caused more panic. Formless appeared behind without anyone noticing. The blonde man was in a state of confusion, not knowing where to aim his gun. Suddenly, someone shouted, "Don't be fooled." The monster killed the team leader. From the opposite direction, Arnold's voice rang out, "Don't believe that dog. It's mimicking voices." Both sides yelled in confusion, making the panicked soldiers aim their guns in all directions. The bewildered soldier turned his gun around in circles but couldn't find a target. He was only getting more confused. Finally, he decided to trust the voice of a 4D behind him and urge him to kill the monster. In his state of confusion, the soldier fired his gun in that direction, hitting whoever happened to be unlucky. It was a desperate move, and whoever got hit was just unlucky. A reliable red bullet flew through the smoke and hit Arnold's right arm, burning through his clothes and skin. Clutching his arm, he cursed at the miserable guy. This guy just liked to stir up trouble. Arnold snapped back and realized that the monster was here. He confidently fired 2 plasma shots at it, but he narrowly missed hitting the real Formless. Formless evaded the 2 shots, spread his wings on his back, and propelled himself upwards with a swift motion, soaring above and aiming directly at Arnold's head. Arnold had no idea this creature had wings, and when he regained his senses, his head had already parted ways with his body. His massive body fell uncontrollably, leaving a large pool of blood on the floor as Formless made a swift escape. The sound of his stumbling into the pool of blood terrified the nearby soldiers, who only saw a blurry black figure nearby. Formless passed by that person like a gust of wind. He pressed close to the person's face, causing him to scream as if his blood pressure had dropped suddenly, because Captain Arnold's face was now inside Formless's tooth-filled mouth. He held Arnold's head in his mouth as he leaped away, not attacking him. But the blonde man was too terrified to make a sound, let alone resist. Faunless continued to jump up to the air duct where he first appeared. He felt a bit regretful that he hadn't cut them up into smaller pieces, but there was no time. The hive was calling him back, urging him to hurry. Samuel found the person he needed to vent his anger on and yelled at the newcomers for being late. The new security guards, seeing such a gruesome scene, dared not resist. They apologized profusely and followed Samuel's orders to clean up the battlefield. By the time the head of the medical team reported that they had completed the identification of casualties, he returned with a hesitant expression. Except for 80 Wade from the research department, everyone else was dead. This was a shock to Samuel, and he was the first to be bitten and still survived. The medical team reported that 80 was immune to the nerve toxin of the creature, but he had been directly attacked in the eyes, nose, and throat, damaging his vision, smell, and taste permanently. Samuel heard that 80 would have to live in a nutrient tank for the rest of his life and fell silent. Living like that was as good as being dead. Suddenly, the head of the medical department suggested surrendering to the space dogs. Samuel glanced at him, clearly criticizing his cowardice, but the man was too afraid of dying. Samuel was also afraid of death, but he felt a surge of anger at the thought of surrendering like that, so he walked away without caring. Looking around and seeing that everyone was dead, Samuel didn't know what to do. Fighting the space dogs would surely result in defeat. As he was pondering whether he should throw everything away and run, Samuel heard the soldiers discussing how strange Arnold's gun looked. Just hearing Arnold's gun, he had the soldiers bring it over before they realized it was a plasma gun. Touching it, Samuel felt reassured. The energy level was still at 60%, but it was enough for self-defense. Now the captain didn't trust anyone but himself, so he hid the gun inside his jacket. Stepping out of the control room with a weary head, he thought that the creature was still lurking inside, and the pack of dogs would come tomorrow without any way to deal with them. Returning to his lair, Faunless spat out some viscous substance to reinforce the floor and walls. For now, the threats to his life had all disappeared. The captain was just sitting there, not daring to do anything, so now was a good time to expand his lair. Faunless raised his head and silently calculated that he could open 2 more lairs besides this one. Having a real place to cultivate his abilities was a priority. Priority number 1 was to take over the spaceship's dining room as his lair, cutting off the food supply to make them afraid. Next was the weapons depot, where he could secure the large plasma gun. One more place he wanted to get to was the laboratory, where there were many genetic modifications and selenium. Although it only increased his attributes by 10%, Faunless was confident he could use his insect skills to prepare for potential enemies. He jumped out of his lair, planning to go straight to the dining room and the laboratory, grabbing the plasma gun for his lair without wasting any time. He slipped through the ventilation hole, thinking about Arnold's words that had led him to steal that gun. Mainly because the person carrying the Eugene family name, whom he referred to as the Master, was about to arrive, and he might as well blend in with the space dock flock. Faunless knew that there was nothing scarier than facing an unknown enemy. He quickened his pace, trying to make the most of his time to gather useful tricks. Suddenly, the specimen's voice erupted, sounding like it was in a good mood today, probably because it hadn't been injected with drugs, so he decided to ask. Faunless was delighted when 26 said he wasn't in pain. That was good, but it had to stop. Faunless was even more pleased to know that everyone on the ship was hiding in their rooms and not going outside. He raised his foot to the laboratory junction, wondering if he should risk going there. As soon as he touched the floor, the red laser beam storage box opened and shone directly on Faunless's head. The specimen in the laboratory saw him standing still and immediately asked what he was doing there for 30 minutes. Faunless didn't answer because he was focused on waiting to see if any soldiers would come to capture him. He raised his arm and happily realized that from now on, he didn't have to sneak around anymore. He threw the ventilation net down below, then gradually landed on the ground and greeted the specimen floating in the container. It had been a long time since they had seen each other. It looks really pink now, huh? Lately, it seems to be healthier and in a better mood. As soon as it saw Faunless, it smiled and complimented him. Suddenly, he stared at 26, wondering if leaving it in there for so long would cause it to die. Should he take it out or leave it in the lair? Because of the slime bubble's characteristics, it wasn't picky about food, and it was also immune to toxins. So Faunless thought he could take it with him or leave it in the lair. So he asked 26 if it wanted to go outside. As soon as it heard the question, it agreed immediately without asking anything else. Faunless crawled down to the ground like a lizard, his 6 legs propelling him forward with force. He jumped towards the container holding the specimen, causing it to shatter. Faunless's first few hands gently caught the specimen before it hit the ground. He could already see 26 happily bouncing like a ball. He placed it on the floor and told it to wait for a moment while he carefully evaluated the terrain to build his lair. Seeing that this place was beautiful, he happily spat out a familiar green fluid, then floated around the room. For every spot he touched, a greenish slime appeared, and they played a game of tag. In no time, the green substance clung tightly to the walls and floor. Then, they grew into things like tree roots intertwining with each other, covering the entire room, making it completely dark. Looking at his handiwork with satisfaction, Faunus was sure that the others wouldn't dare to use the laboratory anymore. He reached out and grabbed the still living brain of some scientist, put it in his mouth, and chewed to replenish the energy he had consumed while building the lair. He complained that the live brain had a terrible smell, so he searched for other things while allowing the slime to choose what it wanted to eat. Look at how nicely it eats. Even though it has only been eating dry rations for a long time, it's really pitiful. As he was engrossed in the buffet, his super senses suddenly alerted him that someone was approaching. After wreaking havoc in this area for a while, someone was finally coming. Impatiently, he looked outside and spotted a security guard leading a researcher towards them. Such a small number, and they dared to come here. It was laughable. Faunus hid with the slime on his back to see what they were up to. As soon as the door opened, both of them were horrified by the ominous atmosphere inside the laboratory. The eerie scene, the shattered remains, and the countless green tendrils entwined everywhere in the room, along with the nauseating metallic smell, assaulted their senses. This security guard looked at the greenish substance as if he were in a park. Hearing movement from behind, Faunus had already pressed close, effortlessly dodging the bullets the guard fired. His four-fingered hand reached out, grabbing the guard who had just realized his fate, and in a simple wave, Faunus made a hole through the guard's body. A few choke sounds came from the guard's helmet as his final moments played out before Faunus withdrew his hand, letting him fall. Blood sprayed out in a large swath as the researcher was horrified, slumped over, half sitting, half crawling, begging for mercy. There was no forgiveness, and Faunus quickly grabbed his bloody hand and pressed it against the pale, terrified face, ready to consume it. Suddenly, the painful cries and whimpers of the slime on his shoulder made him stop and look over. It couldn't express its wishes with words, but its frustrated bouncing on his shoulder was enough for Faunus to understand. The crying and trembling guy was probably one of those who had experimented on the poor slime, so it was furious to see the person who had tortured it now right in front of it. Unable to take matters into its own hands, Faunus used the pointed end of its tail to administer a paralyzing sting to the guy's neck. Instead of tearing out this guy's heart himself, Faunus chose to immobilize him. Rather than self-cannibalism, Faunus drove the sharp end of his tail, which could deliver paralyzing stings, into the guy's neck. This caused the guy to sit down and look like a helpless mute. Only the horror in his eyes, manifesting through flowing tears, revealed the fear of seeing the familiar slime that he had once tortured, now brought before him. It expanded its body, thrusting straight into the face of the wretched researcher, then enclosed the guy's head completely, ensuring not a single sound escaped. Determined not to let out a single whimper, Faunus let the slime handle the tormentor while he moved on, continuing his search for food. He wondered who had a more gruesome death, the soldier who died instantly, or a researcher dying slowly in agony. But he didn't care. He tilted a container of something into his mouth and gulped it down. Both of them were dead, and there was nothing to be done about it. Just as he warmed his stomach, the system interface appeared. Without reading a single word, he smiled comfortably because it showed up at this hour, with nothing but maximum physical attributes waiting for Faunus to unlock new functions. Staring at the notification window, he thought at first that he had to eat 500 dishes to unlock 3 new skills, but now just unlocking the function alone was enough to make him happy. With the first slime now by his feet, he moved it to another place and told it to wait a bit. Then he pressed the yes button on the screen with his finger. His spine protruded higher. The clicking sounds of his bone joints extending were distinctly audible. The slime was quite surprised when it saw its friend suddenly grow taller, with longer arms and legs, about 1.5 times taller than before. It stared in amazement and admired how big and tall he had become. Seeing Faunus increase in size made it very happy, and it jumped around and cheered loudly, making Faunus laugh and say that it had grown up. The slime didn't understand what grown up meant, and it sounded like Faunus was saying that it had become a big baby. It giggled happily and kept jumping around, shouting "big baby" continuously. After thinking for a while, Faunus realized that the slime was right. Physically, he hadn't matured yet, so calling him big baby wasn't entirely inaccurate. Suddenly, he realized that this slime was quite intelligent, and with a little more vocabulary, it would definitely speak well. He touched his body for a while, and Faunus realized that in addition to his increased height, his body had become more rigid. It felt like he had gone from being an imbu cheetah to a thick-skinned rhinoceros. In addition to the significant increase in height, His arms and legs were now covered in extremely sturdy biological armor. The muscles on his calves had also thickened considerably thanks to the newly acquired leg reinforcement ability. Now, he looked back at the status window to see if there was anything interesting. Faunless's information panel had grown slightly longer with the addition of natural regeneration, tongue saw, and toxin-containing organs. Everything seemed fine, but the last line, nervous system reinforcement, was only at 26 points, making him realize that he had a long way to go. For a creature with his abilities, the system had default values for how many functions could be collected, but creating a completely new one would require many times the initial points. For example, if Faunless wanted to increase his nervous system points, he would need to go from 0 to 10, and then from 10 to 20. He stared at the information panel, thinking that if his life wasn't threatened, he would probably spend time considering what to eat to increase his points. But for now, it wasn't necessary. Having food was a relief. Thinking this, he opened his hand and tried the tongue saw skill. It resembled his tail but was thinner and red in color. With the saw blades attached to his body, it was reluctantly acceptable for piercing through walls. Faunless retrieved it, planning to strengthen his physique next, which would undoubtedly make him much stronger. Next, to test the toxic internal organs. Faunless spat a bunch of venom on the floor and was satisfied to see it corrode a deep hole. Combining this feature with his ability to build nests, turning the ship into a fortress of his own seemed feasible, helping him to confront stronger enemies. After completing the checks, Faunless enlarged his body to move on to the next test location. The slime thought he had forgotten about it and immediately jumped along, asking where Big Baby was going and insisting on going with him. This time, there was no need to crawl through the air ducts. I walked confidently into the corridor, eager to see how the crew would react when they saw me. I wondered if they would cry in fear or hastily pull up their pants and run. The sound of footsteps echoed in the corridor along with shouts. "It's coming! It's coming!" Many people with pale faces rushed into a special room together. As the last ones entered, someone yelled to quickly close and hide. But the nearsighted guy assigned to close the door struggled and couldn't get it done. Leaning against the wall, he moaned and died. That's it. Someone who wanted to survive kicked him in the leg and quickly pushed the lever to close the heavy door. Unfortunately, the blackened hand of the invisible entity had reached inside faster than the door closed. The muscular strength allowed him to open the door wider, sticking his head inside, revealing a mouth covered in blood that terrified the people inside. No matter how much they screamed, it couldn't stop the invisible entity from feasting on them like a buffet. Since acquiring new skills, it was easier for him to cut down people, each swing of his arms handling multiple people at once, saving time compared to before. Trapped in the very room they ran into to seek refuge, countless agonized screams and the sound of 5 fingers pounding on the glass door echoed thump thump. In a moment, the echoes faded outside the spaceship, swallowed by the endless darkness of outer space. 80Way's eyes were tightly focused on the footsteps outside, wondering why the doctors weren't moving anymore. He had no idea what was happening out there, which infuriated him beyond measure, wondering what he had done to deserve this torment. Even crying out to the heavens was impossible. His throat was gone, and his eyes couldn't see. To him, life was no different from a blade of grass, and 80 secretly wished for death. Suddenly, the sound of approaching footsteps made him lift his head to guess if those were the boots of soldiers. As it drew closer, 80 panicked and realized it was the same monster, coming for him again. The invisible fingers tapped the J key on the table, making a distinctive sound that surprised 80. Suddenly, the blackened eye of his sensed something soft touching it, and in an instant, slime swelled up, covering his entire face. Layer by layer, his skin slowly dissolved, revealing muscles and then disappearing into the abyss within. 80 felt excruciating pain like fire spreading across his face, but he couldn't resist or scream. His entire body trembled as he endured, facing the invisible entity's gleeful gaze through the glass. 3 hours later, the slime jumped out of its containment and returned to the invisible entity's hand, saying it had finished its meal. He curiously asked what revenge felt like. Still, the naive slime replied, asking what revenge was. When it came to eating humans who had tortured him to the bone, that was revenge, it happily exclaimed. However, the invisible entity didn't seem to derive any pleasure from seeking revenge. This satisfaction resembled being well-fed. He wondered if 26 didn't understand the concept of revenge, or if it simply had no such notion. Suddenly, the invisible entity found itself curious about why it had been extensively researched before. Could it be that after evolving, the bubble slime would transform into a sea demon? Sea demons lived on separate planets, were about 25 meters tall, and hid their sensory organs inside their bodies. In this game, sea demons resembled bubble slimes, leading many to believe they were related. Raising its head, the invisible entity contemplated but still didn't know the answer. Perhaps it had to wait and see how things would develop over time. Suddenly, 26 said, "Big guy, I'm full now and I'm feeling sleepy." It requested to hang on the invisible entity's shoulder and rest. He realized that this slime behaved like a child eating and then falling asleep. So, he lifted it onto his shoulder and walked outside. Seeing the remnants of his nest emitting toxic smoke, the invisible entity was satisfied, thinking that the expansion of the nest was successful. Suddenly, it switched to ruthless mode, continuing to hunt for the next prey. In the territory of the space dogs, the Dvargan on planet C8 screamed loudly from inside a heavily armed spaceship. Those who were about to flee were immediately captured. They dragged the screaming girl aside, saying, "Hey, save me," with smiles on their faces as if they were looking at a delicious hot meal. The girl's older brother wanted to rush in to save his sister but was shot in the back and fell to the floor instantly. The painful cries of the girl echoed through the air, but they didn't move the Thigs who stood laughing there. They delighted in seeing someone who didn't obey them die, licking the knives they carried while shouting and robbing everything they could. Their gang had yellow heads, green heads, purple heads, even a red-eyed horsefly, all surrounding a group of 5 people, both young and old, tightly bound on the floor. They huddled together in fear of the ruthless gang of space dogs, but their greatest fear was the man with a cleft chin sitting on top. A man with a lion's head and a body adorned with various ornaments, sitting with his legs crossed, watched the spectacle below without any expression. He showed neither joy or sorrow on his face, only glancing at the pile of treasures beside him with indifference, as if collecting a little money was not worth bothering about. Fuming, the man's voice from below shouted directly into the face, drawing the attention of the lion-headed man, complaining about why he had betrayed them when they had originally hired mercenaries from planet C8. With a mocking expression, the man confronted him. "Do you think you hired us as friends? You paid a few meager coins and expected this and that. You Lion-Ingan hot guys are all equally foolish." The man knelt down in disbelief, and under the stairs leading to the lion man, he looked diminutive, but his curses were no less fierce. He yelled loudly that the defense forces had undoubtedly received the distress signal and were on their way, promising to kill all of them. The threat didn't make the man afraid. Instead, it made him furious. He roared, "Death is too merciful. I'll turn all of you into experimental freaks." Saying that, he stood up, grabbed the sword in the hand of his red-haired subordinate. This subordinate knew the leader was about to go berserk, so sweat poured from him as if he had taken a shower. Only the blonde man, not knowing what to do, remained expressionless, gnashing his teeth as he listened to the lion's criticism of the Lion-Ingan Hall members' lack of understanding of jungle law. The blonde man's head was forcibly lifted, and he locked eyes with the lion as the man reiterated that without any witnesses to mercenaries breaking the contract, they couldn't be prosecuted. The man's insolent words became increasingly threatening as he pressed his face against the man, breathing directly on him. "I won't let anyone survive to explain to the galactic defense." The blonde man finally sensed the danger and screamed, "Are you planning a massacre?" The man raised his knife, and the terrifying blade licked at him, laughing madly, asking what massacre was. "I don't know, but my favorite thing is skinning Lion-Ingan hot guys." Saying that, there was only the sound of a severed neck and puff as the red blood cells were drawn out of their bodies. The lion man cleaned up, then proudly walked into the lair, where there were dozens of green and pink heads bowing and greeting. He threw something bloody on the ground, telling his subordinates to deal with it as usual. But as the green-haired man picked it up, the lion asked if there was more to do today than usual, which confused the subordinate. Fortunately, the boss didn't get angry today, just told him to bring the garlic over, and their subordinate left immediately. The lion was fed up with his subordinates, asking about everything and showing their dismay, and his expression only changed when there was a report that the garlic had arrived. It turned out to be not the kind of spice with appeal, but a girl in a garlic-colored dress, holding her hands tightly, asking if she could call him. Hearing only one sentence, "Is there something going on these days?" the garlic immediately twisted her hands as if there was something difficult to say. Her awkwardness was evident, and she explained that she had an appointment today with someone at the connection gate, but for some reason, they lost contact suddenly. The lion's temper flared up again, and he roared, "What do you mean? Scaring you to the point of shrinking your shoulders and neck." Knowing he frightened the girl to death, the lion lowered his voice and urged her to explain more carefully. It was Samuel of the research team who requested that a corpse be disposed of. The lion bent down to her to make it clear, asking if Samuel's tribe was nearby. It's not surprising at all. The lion clearly knows that those people are the rulers of the third capital on the planet Titan. He wasn't very interested, but he still asked who that corpse was. Hearing the Eugene clan, His golden eyes narrowed with calculation. A dead woman's body in Samuel's spaceship. He wants to borrow $1 million. Where's the money? But the lion felt something was wrong with this, and it was certain that they were doing something secretly. Not to mention that the atmosphere in the Galactic Federation is currently very strange. It is rumored that the Eugene clan on Earth is being challenged by the Eden clan of Mars, so there is a lot of turmoil underneath. Eden's main source of income comes from repairing and upgrading spaceships, not to mention focusing on repairing genes and researching this guy's biological weapons. And the woman's body from the Eugene clan has definitely undergone gene mutations, and he wondered what would happen if he could deliver that corpse to Eden. With both sides fiercely competing in technology, Eden might even be willing to spend $10 million just to touch that corpse. The lion's yellow teeth clenched as he realized this was a super profitable money-making opportunity. Thinking about how Eden had turned him into a mutant, he really wanted revenge, but that could wait, because revenge and money don't go together. As for the reason for the loss of contact with them, Toy didn't know. The lion could only speculate that the ship had been ambushed by someone. The lion's face turned into a sly smile as he thought about Samuel's ship being so close to his territory. It must be God's will to smack $10 million in his face. Only a fool would not take it. He shouted out orders. We will depart for Samuel's ship as soon as we clean up here. The gang heard that and ran like crazy, shouting and making noise as they blew up the passenger ship, erasing all possible traces, while Toy retreated to prepare for the raid. The spaceship of the Space Dogs started up with a blue light, cutting a path to the yellow passenger ship before launching away from there. A block of explosives was attached to the ship, and as soon as the Space Dog ship went far away, it counted down for a few seconds, and then blew up the passenger ship that had carried many passengers from the Galactic Federation. Very quickly, inside the ship, signals started to be intercepted. He raised his head to look at the dark ceiling, muttering that they had arrived here. He placed his four-fingered hand down and used his super senses, linking his own perception to every nook and cranny of the ship. Very quickly, the nervous system of the Shapeless was connected to every pipeline, every piece of metal on the spacecraft, helping him to identify the unfamiliar people who were penetrating the research vessel to land. On the Great Hall, there were red patterns, precisely the traces of the Space Dogs who had come to rob. The wall of the spaceship burst into flames in a circular path from the outside. In no time, the robbers kicked it inside and made it into a small passage for the buffalo-headed, horse-faced guys to enter, carrying clubs, axes, and all kinds of weapons. They entered the spaceship from the central bridge area of the research ship. Their movements were quick and skillful, truly deserving of being professionals. From another direction outside, there was another group cutting a rectangular shape to infiltrate, making the Shapeless amused, not knowing if these guys were clever or foolish. Anyone with a quick glance could tell that there was something wrong with this ship. They were like Tomb Raiders, blinded by greed, and despite everything, they entered to steal the treasure. However, these guys with banana-colored hair seemed to be more alert. As soon as they kicked in the entrance, they realized that this ship was strangely gloomy, with dim light inside, completely covered by something to the point that they had to call their boss for instructions. The lion was sipping his drink, waiting for his subordinates to bring the loot, when suddenly he heard them talking in confusion, saying that there was something very strange here. He really didn't know what was inside the ship. He could only report that there was no one here, just some scary-looking trees growing in every nook and cranny. The lion growled, thinking that these guys were nervous wrecks. Where would a spaceship get oil for trees to grow? Playing some kind of mentally challenged joke, the lion crushed a glass of wine in his hand and aggressively entered the ship to inspect it himself. Certainly, these subordinates must have seen something that dazzled their eyes. They couldn't trust them. The lion would come and see for himself and then chop off all their heads. So, the Shapeless' super senses successfully detected a group of space dog hunters advancing inside. Leading them was a mutant who looked like a boss with twice the machinery on his body. Among his subordinates was a man who looked both physically and physiologically like a horsefly, a true insect-like person. There was also a guy with purple head making mechanical sounds instead of a heartbeat. He was a cyborg. He laughed out loud, evaluating this army as not bad at all, with various races and gene diversity. Although it would be a bit difficult for him as Formless to defeat 10 people from different species alone, if he succeeded, he would easily evolve. Suddenly, his super senses helped him realize that something was a bit strange. Amongst that motley crew, there was a girl dressed as a research scientist, but it turned out to be just an appearance. Formless used his super senses to detect that the mind of this little girl was like a high-powered supercomputer running at full capacity. It was a perfect mimicry of a normal human. Formless stood up to prepare a plan. and that little girl was the one he needed to pay the most attention to. The slime saw that he was about to leave, so it extended its nozzle and asked, "Why?" He simply explained that he needed to go out, and instructed it not to follow but to stay here and guard the large plasma gun he had acquired. As long as the fawnless said it was important, the slime jumped up and listened obediently, and it told the big baby to trust him. Fawnless quickly rushed in to seize the initiative and launch an attack, because this was the only opportunity to strike them while they were off guard. The current plan was to destroy the enemy's power source and lay some traps for their ships. Fawnless had been lurking inside these guys for a long time. Their greed would split their forces to protect both the research vessel and the mothership from more plundering. The monster hunt was officially beginning as the space dogs divided into the punishment team and the defense team. And Fawnless had a lot of experience in this field, so he was eager to get started. This is the first video I made. If you like it, please hit like so I can make more for you to see.